Hello and welcome to the Unashamed Contender podcast. I am your host, the Unashamed Contender, and this evening I'm going to be debating Chris. Now, I met Chris on Facebook, and we had some interesting discussions there, and today we're going to be debating the topic of slavery in the Bible. Chris seems to hold a different opinion on it than I do. He believes that slavery is included in God's laws as an acceptable practice, more or less, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Chris. And I believe that it explicitly condemns slavery. And so we're going to get into this and see what we can figure out. And with that, Chris, I'll turn it over to you. You're welcome to introduce yourself, and or we can get right into it, and you can tell me why you think that the Bible supports slavery.
Yeah, well, as you said, my name is Chris. I live in Florida. We met online on Facebook on a debate group, and it's it was refreshing that we both were able to have a kind of a civilized debate without it resorting to name calling and things like that. So I was really excited to hear that you uh, were doing a podcast and was excited to be a guest on that. As far as slavery is concerned, you're absolutely right. I believe that it was included in Hebrew law as an acceptable practice. There are several verses that describe it and set out rules and guidelines for it, but allow for it nonetheless. I don't particularly feel that that's a blemish on, the Jewish culture at the time, the Jewish people of the time, because everyone did it. I mean, from Japan to you name it, any culture that had a record of their history at some point in time has been involved in slavery. All of the tribes around Israel were involved in slavery, as is evidenced by some of the verses. And so I don't think that it's a blemish on them. They were just doing what everybody else was doing. But I do understand that for a modern day Christian, that brings up some ethical problems, some ethical dilemmas. That does God permit slavery, or that doesn't seem like something He would do. So, but I'm happy to discuss all the points and consider any arguments you have.
Okay, all right, cool. So I believe that I know that the text that you're referring to. I've had this discussion many times in text, and I'm glad I can get on a podcast and do this now because I think communication is just way better and more efficient. Largely, we would be dealing with Exodus chapter 21, and then mainly once we get down further, I think it ends up boiling down to Leviticus 25. I had a discussion with a different atheist recently, and he's like, "Yeah, it's all in Leviticus 25." But so this would be
Right.
my just general overview of it. In the Bible, there slavery definitely does appear in the Bible, but not as a good thing. Like for example, the children of Israel were in slavery, and they were, the Egyptians were like, "Hey, we'll just, kill every man child among them," and it was fine because they just thought that that was fine. But
Mm-hmm.
this was not actually acceptable to God, is my understanding. He brought them out of that, and then he set them up as their own nation in the land of Canaan and so forth. And there were laws. Now, among those laws were laws about servitude, let's just say, and that spectrum of servitude went from small things like if you're a poor guy and you don't have money, you could work for a guy in return for his goats or cows, and that was a form of paying for something, but you were considered their servant. um,
Right.
and then it goes up. You could sell yourself as a servant for up to 7 years. Now this is something I believe that was largely done by the poor. Abraham, he had big sacks of gold. I'm sure he wasn't like selling himself out as a servant in return for a payment of goats or whatever it is. He
Right.
would just pay for it with gold. So the poor, this would be something that generally falls on the poor. I know that if there are laws that if you stole something and you weren't able to pay it back, then you were sold until your debt was paid. So that was another thing. But it got more the range or the spectrum of servitude went from relatively minuscule, like you could just make an agreement, hey, I'm going to work for you for this week if you could give me whatever salt
Mm-hmm.
or figs or whatever it was, and then it could range all the way up to, which was what we'll get to in Leviticus 25, I believe. It's just lifelong servitude. And there were laws regarding. I mean, first, do you agree with that more or less?
More, yeah, I would just add in as Leviticus, it's lifelong servitude without a debt owed.
Without
That's
a
an
debt
important
owed
that's
and
an
without the
important
ability to
caveat.
ever, but it's lifelong. Like, in other words, you can never
Right.
pay off your debt. Yeah, without a debt owed. Yeah, it's the same thing. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree. So that is all there, but I wanted to mention the spectrum of it because a lot of times when I engage with atheists or other non-believers about this, they confuse the two, but in Hebrew economy and culture, that's how they paid for things. Often was just by X amount of service, weeks, months, years,
Mhm.
etc. The service
Right.
couldn't exceed 7 years. I believe this is specified in Exodus 21. Most of this is all coming from Exodus 21. But then there was also the year of Jubilee, which, every 50 years, everybody, all the servants were set free throughout all the land. I'm not sure if that would apply to Leviticus 25 servants. I'm going to say not, but I'm just throwing it
Yeah.
out there because I happen to think about it right now.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It does.
But
It deals specifically. I can find it if you want me to, but it talks about Israelite slaves or
okay,
servants.
okay, yeah, it might. I think
All
you're
of
right
that
on
is
that.
kind of specific to them. That their brothers have to be treated fairly. They have to
Sure.
be released. 7 years max, and then year of jubilee they're released, which is that's like you said. There's a spectrum there, and
Yeah.
I'm not arguing that every slave was subject to the same brutality that what we think of modern day slavery as being, but my contention is that there was a section of people who were,
In the
which
most severe
does
version of the most extreme end of the side of the spectrum. Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
And I don't agree that it was slavery, so to speak. We'll get into that. But the reason I like to
Okay.
clarify the spectrum and the reason that I appreciated that you already understood this spectrum is because whenever I debate with atheists and stuff, they confuse it all and think it's all one big lump sum, and I'm like, well, how are you a slave? Like, do people sell themselves into slavery, and can slaves really buy their way out of debt or work? Like, no, not really. And plus, the servants, whether they're bond servants, man servants, maid servants, or whatever, there were rules, like you couldn't treat your servants a certain way, or if you did, they would be set free. They'd be relieved of their debt because you abused them. And I think we're going to get
Right.
into that a little bit more because it ends up coming up. There's some verses there. I got them written down here, but we'll get into that. So, um, that said, is the main contention that you have in Leviticus 25?
I would say the main evidence that I have for my contention is Leviticus 25. Exodus, as you mentioned, speaks a lot about slavery, but it deals primarily. You notice how it begins and how it runs is all dealing with Israelite slaves, or what I would
Yeah,
call indebted servants.
I do
Like you could
agree that
have,
the general context there is about Hebrew servants. I agree. Like, even
I
the
think
first.
I think Leviticus is where it deals more with the law of foreign uh, slaves bought, from other countries,
Sure,
and or the children of those slaves.
sure.
The ones that I'm speaking of, that's more of a true pure slavery with no option for repatriation or freedom.
Yeah, no, I understand. Well, let me say one thing about the slavery in general, period, because I believe the Bible directly condemns it. I'll make that point, and then I think, I mean, I would be willing to go directly into Leviticus 25, but
Sure,
in
yeah, that's fine.
in Exodus chapter 21, verse 16, Exodus 21:16, I believe it is. This is the verse that I usually use to demonstrate that slavery is actually condemned by God's law. It says, "And he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death." So the thing about the servants is they either stole something and were sold for their theft until they paid off the debt, but there was always like a debt to be paid, and once it was paid off, they were relieved of it. But here's the thing, is that these people, in this verse, it says, he that stealeth the man's and sells him. So this was not somebody that was up for purchase, so to speak, because they owed a debt or years of service or months or weeks. This was, they had no debt. They were stolen and sold, and it says whoever was to steal them and sell them was put to death. And I think that by extension, or at least this is my argument, by extension, if you are buying somebody that was stolen, and the person that stole him and is selling you is worthy of the death sentence, then by purchasing that stolen person, you would thereby be supporting, you'd be like the main accomplice to the crime. You didn't actually steal him, but you're totally buying a stolen person. So I think that definitely condemns slavery all around. Now, so that's usually my argument. Do you have any response to that you have before we get into Leviticus 25? Because I want your thoughts too here.
Only that Exodus 21. If you read the entire chapter.
Sure.
The very first is, now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. Number 2 is, if thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years shall he serve, and in the 7th he'll go free for nothing.
Yep.
And then it starts describing, if he came in by himself, this is what happens. If he came in with a wife, this is what happens. If the master gives him a wife, this is what happens, which we can talk about that. If a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as men servants do, meaning she doesn't get to go free. Doesn't mean go outside. It means she didn't get her 7-year, freedom.
Well, okay, we'll touch on that, but keep going.
Okay, and then so it goes and it's talking about all of this Hebrew servants, this, and this, and then it comes to, what you were saying, if he smiteth a man, but if he doesn't die after so many days, there's no punishment. But this is all, like Exodus is dealing, in my opinion, is dealing entirely with the law revolving around the indebted servants, the Hebrew servants.
Yeah, sure.
They were the same people.
Sure,
so
but
all of those rules of saying if you steal a man and sell him, or if he's found in your hand, he'll be put to death. This is right along, bookended by rules about Hebrew slaves, not about foreign slaves. So my contention is that we should take that in the whole package that it was delivered as laws regarding Hebrews. Hebrew on Hebrew slavery, if you will.
Well, yes, I agree with that at large, in the sense that the chapter as a whole is dealing with Hebrew servants and so forth, and servants that specifically owe a debt. So I agree with that. Right. There are things in here that are not quite that. So, for example, if you read, and that's why it can be a little tricky, trying to determine, like, should we hyperfixate on this context or should we not? It can be tricky, and I know that. I mean, I'm accountable individual, intellectually honest. I try to be. So I get what you're saying. At the same time, there are some things thrown in here, such as, for example, verse 12, he that smiteth a man so that he die, he shall surely be put to death. Let's see. Verse 15 is kind of the similar. He that smites his father or mother, he shall be put to death. He that stealeth a man. There's some other ones in here. Verse 28, if an ox gore a man or a woman that they die. Right. Like, these ones aren't necessarily all about servants. I mean, I do believe that largely it's about Hebrew servants that owe a debt, but I kind of feel like, even just on my end, defending it or whatever, that I have to allow a little flexibility, because it's not solely about servants. Oxes goring a man, that's nothing about servants. That's just about, hey, if this cow was known to, like, gore people and you didn't do anything about it, stuff like that, yeah, you're going to be punished because you should have done something about it. I think that's what it's talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I don't think that this is all about servants. I think this is just a list of laws that applied to the Hebrew people amongst themselves.
Sure, yeah. Now, let me ask you this.
If a Hebrew's ox gored someone, then he would be punished for that.
Well,
if a Hebrew stole another Hebrew, he would be punished for that.
Yeah, so there is a law. You probably, I'm guessing you might be familiar with it because you seem quite knowledgeable about these texts. There is a verse that I even read recently, and I've known it exists for quite a while, but it says that you shall have one law for the citizen of the nation and for the, as well as for the stranger. And you are familiar that it was one law. Just kind of like if I go into China, I can't break all their laws just because I'm a foreigner. Like,
Right.
you are familiar with this verse, are you not, or do you want
I'm
me to
gonna
pull it up?
I'm gonna find it real fast so I have it. I'd like to read it.
Yeah. I'll try to find it too. I can probably find it pretty quickly. Let's see here. Law strain. I don't know if it uses stranger.
Leviticus 24:22.
Yep. You
You shall
shall have
have the
one
same law
manner
for
of
foreign.
law, as well as for the stranger, as for one of your own country. For I am the Lord your God. So while I do agree that yes, it does say, hey, this is for Hebrews, and it's talking about Hebrew servants. I'll grant that, but at the same time, the laws given they were given to Israel, yeah, but it applied to any stranger that was in their country, foreigner traveling through or residing within the country. It was the same law. It couldn't it just like we have it today. I can't go to another country and break all their rules on, oh, it's fine because I'm a foreigner. Like, that's not how it was. It was one law for everybody.
Well, and in the same breath, one chapter later, um, it talks about the rules dealing with foreign-born slaves, and that they are different. The rules are distinctly different and
Right. Yeah, and I'm
less
willing to acknowledge
less
that.
generous.
That's fine. I'm
So,
willing to acknowledge that. I'm just trying to say that when the Bible makes the specification of, hey, Hebrew servant versus foreigner servant, and it says that there's a difference, I'm willing to go for that. That's fine. But if it doesn't make that distinction, then I kind of feel like I'm obligated to say that's the law of the land. Everybody has to follow it.
well,
Would
that is, but again,
Would you agree?
there's so many contradictions to that I don't know that they lived up to
Well,
that law
I
quite
don't
as much
think
as they would like to.
I'll agree that the Hebrew people didn't live up to it, but the debate we're having is not whether or not they actually did what they were supposed to, but whether or not the laws that they were supposed to follow were actually good laws.
Well, let's then back to Exodus 21. Allah
Okay.
says, we talked about this, uh, verse 7. And if a
Yep.
man sell his daughter to be a maidservant,
Yep.
she shall not go out as the manservants do.
Yep.
And now that go out is something that people maybe ought to read some of the other verses to get a better understanding of what that means. Verse 2: If thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the seventh he shall go out free for nothing. If he came by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. So go out means you're free now. You're going out. No, verse 4: If his master has given him a wife and she has given him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. So this is saying that they don't get to go out with him. They are still the property of the master. Um, and then verse 5 says, if he says, I love my master and my wife and my children, I will not go out. Then they do the put the earring in the doorpost thing, and he doesn't go out. He becomes a servant for life because he wants to stay with his family. But number 7, right after that, it says, if a man sell his daughter to be a maid servant, she shall not go out as the men servants do, meaning she doesn't get any freedom. She owed
Well,
no debt. She was
yeah,
sold by her father, and she does not get an opportunity to redeem herself.
maybe, but maybe not. Right? Here's why. No,
Okay.
I'm going to explain. So it says she shall not go out as the men servants do. It doesn't say that she won't go out at all. It's kind of like how to explain it. It's you know what an appeal to ignorance is?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
It's a logical fallacy. Yeah, basically the way that I usually describe it to people is the simple that if there's missing information, people kind of just take the lack of information and interpret that to mean whatever they want. And people do it when they're interpreting literature, when they're interpreting like real life. So, for example, me and my wife, we were driving down the road. Daughter was in the back seat, and there was a cow, crossing the road, the street. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. Well, when we drove back, the cow wasn't there anymore, and my wife was concluded, oh, the cow must have went home. Well,
Right.
maybe like that cow could be up in outer space, like within an alien spaceship. Yeah, just because it's not here doesn't mean it's automatically where it's supposed to be. So I kind of feel like a similar thing is taking place. I know that it's natural for her when she sees the cow, that's not where it's supposed to be crossing the road, and then when she drives back, it's not there anymore. Oh, the owners must have got it. But really, it could just be behind the neighbor's house, chewing up the strawberries. You see what I'm saying? So I kind of feel like a similar thing could be. I don't know if it could really dogmatically be demonstrated one way or another, but I think a similar thing could be taking place here in the sense that it says she shall not go out as the men servants do, but maybe the way that women went out was different. I don't know. I can't demonstrate it.
It absolutely is, because verse 8, 9, 10, 11 deal with exactly how she can go out, if and when she can go out.
Well,
if
that
she
was
not please her master.
Those ones are all about if she was betrothed, though.
What's that?
Yes, but okay. So verse 7 says, "If a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. If she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself." So verses 8, 9, and 10 are dealing with the maidservant whom he ended up marrying or betrothed to himself. And so that kind of makes it a little bit different than if she didn't end up marrying this guy. I mean, so it's kind of like a different category. Would you agree or no?
Well, it's a category that's talking about how she may get her freedom. Or to be redeemed is she doesn't ever really, women didn't get freedom per se in this time and place. They were the property of someone at all points in time. They didn't go out as free people. She could be redeemed, and that meaning she could be repurchased by her family or by someone else, but that he could not sell her to a foreign nation. That was the one rule on that, is that if he decided he didn't like her and he wanted to sell her again, he couldn't sell her to a foreign nation. Because he has dealt deceitfully with her.
Right.
But if he betrothed her to his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters, meaning she would become kind of a member of the family, a daughter to him. If he take with him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage, he shall not diminish, meaning she's still just going to be a sister wife or whatever. And if he do not these three unto her, then she shall go out free without money. Meaning, if he just completely screws her over and doesn't want her and just kicks her to the curb, then she gets to go out free. That's the exception. That's when she finally gets to do it, if he decides. But there's no option for her to buy her freedom or earn her freedom or anything else. It's entirely the choice of the master.
Yeah,
which is
as long as we acknowledge the context of the marriage there, because it's verses 8, 9, and 10. It's all about he actually married this woman. That changes the dynamic of is from if he didn't marry her. Like even today, and I don't even know how you feel about marriage, since technically it's a religious thing, but when you're married rules are just different when you're married. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. I said I've been married 33 years, so it worked out pretty well for me.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah. So I get what you're saying. Verses 8, 9, and 10, I think, change the dynamic from just a woman, period, being a maidservant to another person. Like, in other words, if a guy was to sell his daughter, like he's a poor dude, that's probably why he's doing it, right? So he's a poor dude. He's like, hey, can I have those 3 cows or whatever? My daughter will come work for you for a year. And if the master ended up marrying that daughter, then 8, 9, and 10 applies explicitly as stated. I think that's a little bit different than if the man's like, hey, I need your 3 cows. My daughter can work for you for 6 months, year, whatever, and then the master doesn't marry her, then I don't know that all those apply. Would you concede that or
Well,
no?
they don't apply, but there's no other law that we have that describes
Right,
what
yeah,
happens. So
I
talking
agree.
about that appeal to ignorance, we can't imagine that she gets to go home,
Well,
and we have to
no,
find
I'm
it
not.
somewhere
What I'm not doing is imagining something that's not there. What I'm just saying, like, because I am just as much against imagining it my way, or a way that would favor me, I should say, as I am against you imagining it a way that would favor you, or anybody imagining it. If we're gonna imagine it, we don't. Christians, if they're just gonna make up their own stuff, they don't need the Bible. Just make up your own stuff. So I'm very much willing to stick with it. I'm just saying that if you're going to say that the claims of the Bible promote slavery or are bad, and you're trying to demonstrate that, that's fine. But it actually has to be a verse there demonstrating the claim that you're saying. The appeal to ignorance, it doesn't. It really just makes both of us look bad if we use it. So I'm not saying, like, I'll agree with you that there's no law that says, well, what if the man sells his daughter and they don't get married? What then? I'll agree. I have not. I don't remember, but I'll go ahead and concede that there's no other verses that say what to do. That sounds reasonable. I don't recall any, but that doesn't mean I get to make up verses and be like, well, this is probably what it is. No, I don't get to. I don't get to make that up. I don't know. The way that this worked, at least in my understanding, is these were the laws, the principles, the guidelines by which the judges would judge. Now, the cases that would come up to the judges probably didn't follow all this stuff verbatim. It just probably
I'm sure
just
there
didn't
were
do that. But what
little
the judges
variations.
were, what their job was to do was to, like, hear the case, understand the circumstances, and then judge by the principles as best they could that were in the law. Would you agree?
Oh, I would agree, but I'm
Okay.
just according to these laws, I don't I don't find the law, and we find a lot of very detailed laws about if an ox gores a man. I mean, was that something that happened every day? I would imagine just that women wanting to not be slaves anymore would be more of a common daily occurrence than oxes goring people. And
Well,
so I think that the glaring omission of, if a woman wants to pay off her debt, she can, and then she goes free. The fact that that's not in there anywhere seems like it paints a picture to me of that wasn't really an option. And again,
well, that's
you talked
technically
about
its appeal
if they
to
decide
ignorance,
not to
and
get married.
I do get what you're saying. But it is like that's actually his wife though too. So it's kind of like, does she like? She's his
Well, if
servant,
it's
yeah,
not,
but she's also his wife. I don't know. I kind of feel like,
verse 8 says, if she please not her master, who
uh-huh.
hath betrothed her to himself. I mean, that's exactly the case you're describing, of they were going to get married, and then for whatever reason he changed his mind. He said, I'm not pleased anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Then he shall let her be redeemed. That means purchased. It doesn't mean go free. So that means
Yes.
she's up back on the block. But he is not allowed to sell her unto a strange nation.
Right.
That's the only
But
caveat.
when she was to be redeemed, though, because here's the thing: when she was to be redeemed, redeemed from what? Well, if she was sold for X amount of time, we know it can't exceed 7 years. So when she's redeemed, that just means that as far as I understand, that the difference was paid. So that way, the master, the amount that he paid for her, he got his full worth out of it, whatever the agreement was. The father got his cows, whatever it was. So it's not like she was being redeemed from like some sort of lifelong slavery. There was already an agreed amount of time that she was to be the servant. And so when she's redeemed, like maybe her rich brother comes back from Asia or something, and he's like, oh yeah, like I'll totally pay the difference, and then she's free. So
actually, that verse 7 disagrees with you, because it says, if a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the manservants do, meaning she doesn't get that option at 7 years.
How did the men servants go out?
Well, you look at the verses in front.
How did the women servants go out?
6 years. If thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing.
Right.
That's verse 2. Then it says if he came by himself, he goes out by himself.
Yeah.
If he came with a wife, follow that. But then it says, verse 7, if a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. So
How
she
did
was not
she go out
eligible
though?
for, she didn't go out.
Well,
She
but
doesn't get
it
to.
doesn't say she didn't go out. It says she doesn't go out like the men servants do. Like,
Meaning all the ways that we just described how they can go out, those don't apply to her.
right. So there would, so when this is how it reads to me. The ways that men servants went out, women servants didn't. So if they had other ways of going out, which it doesn't really specify except this betrothal wife thing, then it was a different way. Now, again, I can't invent verses and say that they're real, but I don't think you get to do it either. So my claim is I don't know.
Well, if neither of us get to invent verses and we only have chapter 21, 2 through 11,
Mhm.
then we know that she has very limited ways that are described that she can ever get away from her master.
Well, that are described.
Basically, she is sold into forced sexual slavery, and she has no option. I mean, if who hath betrothed her to himself, it doesn't say she liked the guy. She was sold to him. She didn't pick a husband. Her dad sold her to the man, and the man decided, hey, I think I'm going to marry this girl. And if he changes his mind, if she please not her master, doesn't say if she please not her husband, it says if she please not her master.
Yeah, I
Her
agree that she was both. Yeah.
Yeah, meaning that she can be sold again to someone else, just not to a foreign nation. So they're passing her along as property. Just straight up, that's slavery. I'm sorry.
Well, we haven't really talked about the slavery part. That's in Leviticus 25. You agreed that I believe earlier that Exodus 21 is largely dealing with Hebrew servants that were couldn't be sold into for a debt of up more than 7 years, etc., etc., etc. There was the law of Jubilee and yada yada yada, and all these rules apply. So and that's something that I want to clarify, like, because it seems like you call it all slavery, like the entire spectrum, and I don't think that a lot of things on the spectrum would be considered slavery as we would say slavery today. Do you disagree, or?
Right. No, I agree, but I think that an important distinction is between Hebrew men servants and Hebrew female servants. And the law in 21 very clearly differentiates. The men servants get a lot of extra leeway. They do only have a limited time of servitude, regardless of debt. But again, just as clearly as it says, he shall serve 6 years and then go free, it also says she shall not go out.
But it says she doesn't go out as the men servants do. Like, so let me give you a potential. Now, I'm not claiming this is real, but let me give you for potential for what that wording means to me. It could have been, okay. And again, I'm not saying that it's real because I have no place to claim that, but based off the language of the text, men servants can go out free after 7 years. Women servants might only be 5. Now, it doesn't say that, so I don't get to make that claim. But you don't also you equally can't make the claim that, oh, that means they can never go out. It just means that it's a difference. She doesn't go out like the men servants do. If there were other means of that, there were other means. If there weren't, there weren't. But neither of us get to invent it.
I'm not inventing, though. I'm giving you verse 8, 9, 10, and 11. That
yeah, but she was betrothed in those cases. What if she wasn't betrothed? Then what? What do you think would be the case?
Truly and honestly, I think that they probably weren't bought if they weren't for that intention. I don't think they were buying a lot of female slaves. I think they would prefer men slaves. If she's a maid servant.
Wait. Okay, did we concede on the slaves thing though? Because you keep saying slaves, but you agree that a lot. You just conceded that a lot on the spectrum wouldn't actually.
And I'll tell you what. I'll even grant you, because it does say, verse 11 says, "If he do not these 3 unto her, then she shall go out free without money." So that could be interpreted as he buys her from dad and just doesn't marry her, doesn't betroth her to his son, doesn't take another wife, then she gets to go free. Like, you can't just leave me here as a worker. I get to go free now, and you
Right.
messed up. Which maybe that happens, and that person in that instance, that female would get to go free. But there's still a lot of other verses in there that describe how some women didn't, which made them effectively uh, slaves.
Some
They
would.
had no choice
Which
to
women
leave.
didn't? I don't understand. Which women didn't? You mean the
Verse 11 basically says, if he do not these three unto her, meaning the three,
the
you know,
duty of marriage? What does it say? It says raiment. So he had to make sure that she had food, clothes, and her duty of marriage, which is sexual cohabitation. So in other words, he had to like take care of her in terms of her sexual desires, her food, and her clothes. And if he didn't, she could go out free.
right, yeah, if he just basically abandoned her, got another wife, and said, I'm not taking care of you anymore, then she was free to leave. But that was after she had been forcefully sold to the man and cohabited
Well,
as his
but
wife
how
without
do you
without option.
how do you know that she was
I mean,
forcefully sold? I don't understand. Like, how did you come to the conclusion she was forcefully sold? Like, the dad said, "I'm selling you," and they're like, how do you know that they didn't have any conversation between dad and daughter? Like, I know that I guess that could happen, but you're like asserting that it did and does, and I'm like, I don't know that you can do
it,
that.
it it did and does all over the world, and it still does in some parts of the world,
But
unfortunately.
according to the
It's very
text,
common.
where are you getting that? Like that? Okay, you could have, and it says this in the same chapter, I believe, a guy that sells himself because he's poor. So what if you
Hmm.
have a poor father that, he's trying to take care of his family and he doesn't know how to do it, and the daughter comes and he's like, hey, if you sell me for X amount of service for to, whoever, then,
Yeah,
it can help, so we don't remain in poverty and such. Like, how do you know that, like, this was
I think
just like, go
that
ahead.
seems like reaching. I'm just gonna say
No,
that seems
I'm
like
not
reaching. But
saying that it's a
if you
fact what
if I,
I'm posing. I'm just saying, how do you know that what you're saying is a fact? Because that's not in the text.
if a man sell his daughter, I mean that's a
Yeah,
man
but that
selling
doesn't
his
mean that.
daughter.
But okay, so let's put it this way. Let's say I'm a really poor dude. I have a daughter, and I don't know how to pay for things, and I'm like, hey, I really don't want to. You're my daughter. I love you, but would you be willing to, go work for so and so for X amount of, like, I don't see how that's so implausible to say that a poor guy wouldn't do that even if he didn't want to. Like, even the people that sold themselves, I don't think they wanted to do that. I think it's more like they're in poverty. They don't know what else to do, but they need to eat and have clothes and have a place to stay. And I think I will even say that probably some people were poor enough that they'd prefer to sell their daughter to somebody else because the master would be able to give her better food, better clothes, better everything. And but you're
Very very
you're posing that the idea that, oh yeah, she did, like, just get rid of the daughter, like she's just like a cow or something. And I'm like, maybe, but you can't insert that into the text any more than I can insert what I'm saying. So, right?
I don't know. Like I said, it says clearly, if a man sell his daughter, it doesn't
Yeah.
say if they talk it over and she decides to go. It just says if a man
Well,
sell his
but
daughter,
it says
that was
sell
the
his
law.
daughter. There could be mutual agreement. There could have been discussion. There might not have been. I agree.
Well,
It could be either way, but you don't get to
it's
read it
very likely
into the
that it was
text what's not
very
there.
likely that it was both ways. Very likely that it was both ways. There
It
were
could have
probably good
possibly
fathers
been
who
both
couldn't
ways.
feed their
Yeah.
daughters and said, "Hey, honey, if you go with this guy, he's going to take care of you, and I can't. I'm starving to death. Your best shot is over there." And she might have said, "Okay, let's do that."
Yep.
But there also, could have been, like I said, it doesn't say if a woman decides with her
No,
father to
I
be
agree
sold.
that. I agree
It
that.
very clearly puts the authorization, the authority to sell a human being uh, with the father. He has the authority, the power under the law to sell his daughter. That is step one of slavery. It doesn't say that they have to agree.
No, no,
There's nowhere
I
in there that
understand. I'm just saying that I can't invent
or,
things that aren't there, but you don't get to either. All we know is that if a man sell his daughter, XYZ, we don't really know all the details, so we don't get to invent them. But, okay, well, I don't know if you're satisfied with that conversation. I feel like we kind of
sure.
fleshed that out maybe as much as we can, and we got as far as we're going to get. If you want to go more, we can, or do you want to get into Leviticus 25?
Yeah, we can go to Leviticus, talk about the foreign slaves. They're treated worse than the maidservants, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, so let's go there. So Leviticus 25, and we'll read the key text there, or you can just read whichever portions that you think are the most critical. Isn't it verses 45 and 46?
44 through 46 are the primary ones that deal with it. Both thy bondsmen and thy bondsmaids, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathen that are round about of you. Of them shall ye buy bondmen and bondsmaids. So it's saying, if you have them, they need to be of the heathen around you. And these, as we see, are a different class of slave than the Hebrews. The brethren, same blood.
It's different. It's different on the spectrum. I agree, and it's specifically not Hebrews. I agree.
Yeah, and it says, moreover, of the children of the strangers that do sojourn among you, of them shall ye buy, and of their families that are with you, which they begat in your land, and they shall be your possession. That seems to me to be the most rock solid, just as the quintessential definition of a slave is a possession. They have no agency at that point. They belong to you. And ye shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, meaning there is no redemption, there is no paying off a debt, to inherit them for a possession. Again, mentioning the word possession. They shall be your bondmen forever. But over your brethren, the children of Israel, ye shall not rule one over another with vigor. So it kind of backs up and says, but if they're an Israeli, then you don't treat them this way.
Right. Yeah. Of the children. Yeah, that's different. I agree. Yeah. So this being the strongest argument for them for you saying that the Bible actually did allow, or God's laws actually did allow slavery, because specifically they were not ever able to pay off a debt and cease to be servants. Is that correct?
Well, these are some men that are unable to pay off their debt. They're purchased from a foreign nation. All women, all children seem to be lifelong servants as well, as Exodus described. But men had the option to go free unless you're a foreign man, and then you're inherited as a possession. You become the property of the estate. There's no option.
So one of the first things that I point out from these verses is that, and I think I know where the conversation will go with it, but we'll just read it and see. Is that, let's see, where is it? Okay. More of it. Okay. Verse 45. Moreover, of the children of the strangers that do sojourn among you, of them shall ye buy. Now, since they were bought, remembering from Exodus 21, I can't remember if it's verse 16 or something like that. If they're up for sale, it was wrong for for you to buy somebody that was stolen, then these heathen people that are being bought, they weren't stolen, because if they were, the Hebrews would be guilty by being an accomplice to the man that is engaging in something that is worthy of death, which is human trafficking. Do you understand the argument that I tried my best to articulate there?
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from. I would contend that Exodus is dealing again with Hebrew with Hebrew indentured servants. I like to use that when I'm talking about the Hebrews because it was more of an indentured servitude. You were indebted. You were serving off your debt. These guys, I think, are just straight up slaves, because it doesn't give them those options. They don't have the same leeway. It even further down, when it verse 46, it's kind of weird. It sort of, I wish verse 46 was divided into two verses because it sort of changes topic about halfway through. It says, and ye shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you. This is talking about the foreign slaves, to inherit them for a possession, meaning it's perpetual. There is no escape. Mm-hmm. They shall be your bondmen forever, explicitly. But over your brethren, this is where there should be a new paragraph. But over your brethren, the children of Israel, ye shall not rule one another with vigor. And if a sojourner or stranger wax rich by thee, meaning one of these strangers is rich, and and thy brother that dwelleth by him wax poor, and sell himself unto the stranger. This is back to the indentured servitude. If a brother and a Jew sells themselves to a stranger, or to the stock of the stranger's family, this is back to the indebted servitude. Then it immediately says, after that he is sold, he may be redeemed again by one of his brethren, or his uncle, or his uncle's son may redeem him, or any nigh of kin, or he may be able to redeem himself. So it reiterates, it kind of rolls back to Exodus and says, you can buy all these slaves and they're your possession forever, except if they're Jewish. If they're Israeli people, Hebrew, then these rules still apply.
Sure, yeah, I get that.
Freedom.
Is the division that you're wanting, you said a new paragraph, is that division in 46 critical? And this is just me wanting clarification to your argument, because I feel like it's kind of giving a full story, like it's saying, except blah, 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 etc., but if such and such, then blah, blah, blah. I kind of feel like that's a continually flowing thought. So is that...
I'm just saying that it stops talking at that colon. It stops talking about foreign slaves, the bondmen.
Okay.
That it refers to as bondmen.
Yeah, okay.
And then it comes and says, but over your brethren, you can't do this.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, I agree. Okay. So, and my first contention is that, let me ask you this. Why do you think that these heathen people were being sold? Do you think that they were stolen? And if they were stolen, would the people who stole them to sell them be worthy of death? And then if the Hebrews were to buy of them knowing that they were stolen, would the Hebrews also be guilty as an accomplice? So so do you think that, so first, why were these people being sold to the Hebrews, these heathen people? And two, if they were stolen, these people that are being sold, if they were stolen, do you agree or concede that it would be wrong for the Hebrews to buy them because God's law says that whoever stole him and is selling him is worthy of death? Would you at least agree that much?
I can't, because, again, Exodus dealt exclusively with Hebrew versus Hebrew servitude. And so that verse appearing in there, I think, gives strong evidence that it was talking about you can't steal another Hebrew and make him a slave. You look at the history of the tribes around, the Hebrew people, they were all dealing in slavery. They weren't nearly as nice. And I'll say this, it was a much crueler culture dealing with slaves in the surrounding nations. And so these guys buying slaves, I don't know how they would be able to certify that this person had a debt, first off, to know, that he had a debt. So they're buying something based just on what the seller is telling them.
Yeah, they have to trust them ultimately. I agree.
Yeah. And also, for your argument to hold, one would have to assume that every single foreign slave sold himself into slavery for life.
Well,
because only then could they be held perpetually.
Well, one, I can't claim to know all of what was going on because I just don't. But this is what I would say, is that if a person, according to at least Hebrew law, now these are people from heathen lands. I don't know how they operated, but at least according to the Hebrew laws, which you and I both know and are relatively familiar with, if a person stole something, he was to be sold for his theft till the debt was paid. At least that's my
Mhm.
best understanding of it. However, what if somebody stole something to the point that even in an entire lifetime they wouldn't pay it back? That would mean, yeah, you're kind of like, you kind of burned yourself, and so you would be sold
Sure.
for
Yeah.
life. Would
Unlike
you?
life in prison, people do bad enough things that their life is taken
Yeah.
at that point.
Well,
You know,
life in
spent.
prison, I think punishment is good. I think life in prison doesn't really. I think life as a servant would be better. Not the slave
Oh, sure. I was
free.
just using that as an
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not trying
Okay.
to equivocate.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So, I don't really know these heathen people that were selling these servants to the Hebrews that were going to be a possession of the Hebrews forever, and these servants could never um, pay off a debt because that's not how it worked. It was just going to be that way forever. Like, I don't know why these people were being sold. Maybe there's some stuff that was in, maybe it's some in the apocryphal book. I don't know. I don't. So I'm just going to claim ignorance. I do think that if the Hebrews knew that these people were stolen and they were buying stolen men, then I think the Hebrews would be guilty by extension, and supporting something that makes the stealer and the seller worthy of death. So I'm going to make that clarification because my position, as you know, is that the Bible does not support slavery. That's my claim. So these are some things that I'm bringing up. I know that this doesn't magically solve all the problems and make them all go away, and we're going to talk further. But I do think that these things are things to consider. Like, these people are being bought, okay, but why were they being sold? I really don't know. And again, I don't get to invent stuff, but I think it's something to consider because, when we're scrutinizing text and we're trying to figure out, is this right or is this wrong? I mean, you got to consider possibilities at least. And maybe that doesn't really help. But if nothing else, you could at least hopefully maybe come to a more balanced understanding, just kind of like we did with before with the whole, well, he could have said, hey, your best shot is with this guy, he can take care of you, if you stay with me you'll be poor. And then there's a father who probably just sold his daughter because he doesn't love her. Like, both of those are possibilities. We don't get to invent it, but I think it's fair to consider possibilities. So do you have any response to that, and then I can get into what I think about more specifically Leviticus 25. But your response
My
first.
only my only I guess contention with that, and I don't doubt that again there was a whole spectrum of situations.
Sure.
Each individual had their own debts, their own crimes, their own, whether they're man, woman, rich, poor. Everyone had their own story, and so these laws, um, they're they're different for the Hebrews. We can agree on that than they are for foreigners. But if every foreigner had his own story, there's very almost certainly that some of them committed horrific crimes or stole something that they could never repay and were taken as a lifelong slave. But there's also, you can't, it would be impossible to assume or to take as natural that every single foreign slave acquired thousands and tens of thousands of these slaves, probably hundreds of thousands over the centuries, were all lifelong debt. But yet the law required of all of them a blanket lifetime of servitude, which means that there's no law written that says this is how this guy can get out.
Oh
This
yeah,
is
no,
how he can
I
go free.
understand. Yeah, I
So
agree.
so you
I'm
have
not
to.
what I'm not trying to do is assert that all of the people bought were lifelong servants because they owed a debt beyond their ability to pay. I'm not trying to assert that here. What I'm trying to do is assert possibilities for intelligent dialogue and being fair. Like, I still think that if the Hebrew, and would you concede this actually, that if the Hebrew knew that the person that was being sold to them was stolen, do you at least agree that the Hebrew would, like, it would be sinful and condemned by Hebrew law for him to buy that man? Would you, by extension, Would you agree? You
Right.
concede at
You
least
know,
that much if he knew?
I can leave that one go. I still feel, because of where it's placed in the Hebrew law dealing with Hebrews, that that's what they meant by that. I think that it does go kind of contradict some of this here, but you know, it's not critical to my overarching argument.
Sure,
So
yeah, yeah.
you know, I can I can concede that point. Um, my overarching argument is that everybody was treated differently, but in the law, there are there are laws written specifically for lifelong slaves, unable to free themselves, unable to
Right.
be freed by another person, and that's written into the law, which makes slavery, you know, a part of Hebrew law, even if it was rare, even if it just hardly ever happened. The fact that it says they never get away, they're always your
And not
possession,
even
they're your
that,
children.
just to benefit your case, not to like fight against my side, but just to benefit your case, even these servants that you bought, even their children were going to be your servants, right?
Oh, right, and they owed no debt.
Yeah.
They didn't do any crime, you
Right, right,
know,
right, right,
and
right. Yeah, I'm
so
surprised that you didn't get there because that
well,
would have
we were
just kind
getting
of
there.
like
We were
ended
getting
that
there.
one.
I'm saving my ammo. For
Okay, it's all good, man. It's good. So, one thing I do want to mention, though, because you keep referring to Leviticus, or sorry, Exodus 21:16 as being referring specifically to Hebrew servants, I do want to point out that there is a verse in Deuteronomy which says very similarly to Exodus 21, but it specifies Hebrews. So this is Deuteronomy 24, verse 7. It says, "If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put away evil from among you." So Deuteronomy 24:7 does specify that if it's if you steal somebody of the children of Israel, that it's sin, that person will die. Buying and selling them, human trafficking, essentially. But
Right.
it doesn't say that in Exodus 21. It leaves it. I don't want to say it leaves it open, but it doesn't make any specification as to who this
It doesn't
was.
specify.
You agree
Yeah,
that?
you're right. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Okay. So because it doesn't specify, I kind of feel like we can't like make it say that it's definitely only referring to the. Well, you can say that, but it doesn't actually say that. Now, if it was only Deuteronomy, you might have more of an argument, but I think that because the one in Exodus doesn't make that specification, that's a lot harder to claim. But going
And again,
back,
it's not critical to
yeah,
my
no,
overarching
we're
argument.
getting to the critical part. We're getting to the critical part.
I'll leave that one alone.
So
Speaking of
these,
Deuteronomy, though, Deuteronomy 21 is kind of interesting. Verse 10 through 14.
yep.
Female war captives can be taken as wives or concubines after conquest. That is forced slavery. Now, one could argue, well, they'd starve, all their men were dead, or something like that. But it specifically says, if unwanted later, they may be released. There's a whole
Which
description
verses are these?
how
I'm
you
sorry.
can take female captives. It's Deuteronomy 21, starting verse 10.
Judah 21:10 goes forth to war against thine enemies. Oh yeah, I remember these. And seest the covenant beautiful, hast desired that thou let her be the wife. Okay. Against thine enemies. Yeah, this couldn't be the. Okay, I'm just trying to remember where this is. Okay. Yeah, and we can talk about that too if you want. Are you ready to go to So let's definitely deal with Leviticus 25 where we were at. So,
Sure.
this is how. So let me ask you. So we're gonna deal specifically, just so we can escape from all the other jabber that we've discussed so far.
All right.
But let's just focus in on the children of the because you bought these servants from among heathen nations, and these servants had children, and those children were going to be they didn't owe anybody, they didn't do anything wrong, they were just born to their parents that were heathen servants to the Israelites. So I want to focus in on this class because I feel like this is your strongest argument, and so I want to focus in on this. Now, these servants, these children that became servants of Israel, what about them specifically do you think, because we talked about the whole spectrum. Some of it's very mild. I'm gonna paint your fence, you mow my yard, something like that. We wouldn't call that slavery. Then this is where you would have the closest thing ever to calling it slavery. Why do you think that this is slavery specifically? Is it because they can never redeem themselves? Is it because they're mistreated? Is it because of what? Because their
they lack
property?
agency. They
They
lack agency. They have no ability to control their own destiny.
Okay, so they're not as
I mean, that's the definition of a free man. A free person has control of their own destiny. I can jump in my car and drive to Denver tonight if I want to.
sure.
A slave can't, because those people born into slavery lack agency for their entire lives, and they did nothing to warrant that. They're not a criminal or a
Right.
debtor. They were just misfortunate to be born into a family, and because of that misfortune, they are perpetually, for their entire life, uh, doomed to be the property of the master's estate.
Okay, so is there anything else you want to add to that, or is it just that they lack agency? They lack freedom
Well,
to. That's
that's what makes you a slave.
That's
Well,
it?
I've said
Okay.
that. I mean, I don't. I think that's the critical distinction.
Okay.
They may have been treated wonderfully. They may have been pampered. It doesn't really
Okay.
matter if they weren't free to leave when they wanted to leave.
Okay.
Then
So
then
okay,
that's
I just want to make sure that I understood your argument. Okay, so this is my question. I'm gonna interrogate this position of yours a little bit, but it's not to be mean. It's to be fun here.
Sure.
So is there any other? Uh, let's just use America, just because we're familiar with it. Are there any other people in America that aren't slaves, that haven't done anything wrong, that lack agency? Like any type of class of people, any type of anything that you can think of.
Sure. I mean, children. Children can't jump in a car
Okay.
and drive to Denver.
Right. So
Mentally
children lack
disabled,
agency.
some
Sure.
people, um, are restricted because of age. That'd probably be the uh, most obvious one. Would
Yeah,
be,
sure. What about, is there
children
any other classes that you can think of?
that are denied agency, because it's not just lacking it; it's being denied it, saying you don't have the option.
Okay, so
And I
so you
can't
want
other than people who have been incarcerated.
sure.
I think that'd be really the only other.
So do you want to
prisoners
change
or young
do you want to change your original statement from lacking agency to being denied agency? I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that, like, I
to
want to
clarify.
attack your strongest argument. I don't want to attack the flimsy ones. Okay, so
Right. Yeah,
so
I would say, that is a necessary component of slavery, is that you're denied agency.
you're denied agency. Okay. So this may sound a little funny to you, and we'll probably disagree, and that's okay. But why is being denied this agency? Okay, denied to do what specifically? Let me just make sure that I understand you better. Denied agency to do what?
To live the life that you choose.
So just to, which could be anything.
Could be anything. I want to paint. I want to
Okay.
go to travel to France. Whatever
Okay.
free people do, anything that a free person does, for slavery to not exist, these people would have the agency to do those things, all of them.
Okay. So
If they're denied, if they're restricted in their any way for anything that they would like to do, then that's a component of slavery,
okay.
regardless of how kindly or poorly they're treated.
Okay. What? I'm just writing this down. So essentially,
Sure.
it's being denied agency to do what you want to do, whether it's you want to be a doctor or you want to whatever move to Europe or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
Just
Sure.
you're being denied the agency to do whatever it is that you're wanting to do with your life. So this is where it's gonna sound a little funny when I ask this question, but why do you think that's bad? Yeah, it's funny,
Well,
but why do you
we're
actually
getting into a
think that?
philosophical component there, because to argue that is to say, why do you think slavery is bad? If they're treated well, then what was so bad? And but if we do that, um, you then that basically is defending all slavery. We can say that about
No,
American
I'm
slavery.
asking a
These
question.
folks
I'm
were
not
out
making a
running around in the
statement.
woods, and then now they're living, wearing suits and ties and serving tea, in a nice house.
I'm not
We we
defending
we
slavery by
upgraded their
asking
life.
a question. I'm just asking. I've not made any statement yet. I'm asking why you think that's bad.
I think, well, I think that all people should have the right to live their lives as they want. I think that's kind of I mean, even the American founding fathers. It's in
Sure.
our Constitution. It's freedom is a fundamental component of liberty of life. To live a full life, you need to have your own agency. Um, I just want to say that's kind of a just self-evident in my mind, that not having agency is bad.
Okay. So, and you're probably going to disagree with me on this too, but what do you think about the Bible when it says, and we'll just deal with New Testament. It's more adapted to our modern way of thinking. The Old Testament culture was very different than, and then there's New
I agree.
Testament. It seems like in America, among Christians at least, New Testament culture seems to be more followed. I guess even though it's very similar, but I'm guessing more like the writings of Paul and so forth. So the Bible says that a woman, if she gets married, because she doesn't have to, but if she gets married, which a lot of people just period want to get married because they desire that intimacy or connection. I'm not even necessarily just sexual. They just want to be close. They want to be committed. They want to be in a lasting, lifelong relationship with somebody. Do you think that it's wrong for these women to have to obey their husbands? Do you think that that in any way
Like,
makes them like
like
a second class
exclusively,
citizen or
like without exception, yeah, that would be wrong.
well, no, not without exception, because the scriptures are clear that if man tells you to do something evil, you ignore him and you do good. So, without exception, I don't think the Bible actually teaches without exception. There are
Right.
exceptions. So, that being the case, what I'm just asking the question. Granted, we'll just say the obvious exceptions of you're being told to do something you shouldn't do, or that would destroy your body or your health, or you're being told to lie, cheat, steal, kill, stuff like that. Granted,
Hmm.
like some fundamental exceptions that a lot of people would generally agree on. Do you think that the woman having to obey her husband regarding like let's say the husband says, "Hey, we need to move to Colorado for my job," and the woman doesn't want to do that, do you think that the woman is in any way oppressed or afflicted or like a second class citizen because she's supposed to obey her husband?
Are we talking like what does the Bible think, or what do I personally think?
What do you personally think?
Oh, I think that a woman has every right that a man has. She has the agency. If she doesn't want to move to Denver, then she has to weigh herself the cost of
Hmm.
losing her husband or what may come of that, and she makes her decision.
So,
She should not be forced ever to, just drag, have her life ripped away from her and thrown
sure.
in a car and sent to Denver.
When you
No,
say
I
forced, what
disagree.
do you mean? Like forced on threat of death, or forced, or like strongly
Forced,
coerced, or doesn't really have much
strongly,
options? What do you mean when you say forced?
any of those things, whether it be forced, whether it be coerced, whether it be uh, coerced biblically or religiously. The Bible tells you you have to do this. It's one of the things that gets me on podcasts and online debating is this is another area similar to slavery where the Bible the morality of the Bible diverges from my personal morality. I
Right,
believe
yeah,
that
and that's
every human
fine.
being has their own agency.
And I
The Bible
suspected
doesn't
that it
necessarily
might.
agree with it.
I suspected that it might. Even among Christians, you'll find a lot of Christians, especially a lot of Christian women, they don't actually believe that they're supposed to submit to and obey their husbands. I was actually talking with a Christian woman recently. I wasn't really talking with her. She made a post to which I commented, and her post was like, because there's like, I want to say 8 to 10 verses that explicitly state that the wife is to obey her husband, submit to her husband, revere her husband,
Oh yeah,
etc.
it's all written.
And she's reading these verses as a Christian, probably a very stout Christian in her mind, and she's like, I think these verses mean that what they're really trying to say is that women got to be careful not to be deceived. And then I was like, what? And I'm like, and she had some big explanation
Okay.
for why she thought this, right? Because the woman was deceived, and when she was deceived into sin, and then Adam was told that he was going to rule over his wife as part of her punishment for being deceived, and all this stuff. And I'm like, I understand, but it does, when the Bible says obey your husband, it's not saying you need to be careful not to be deceived. It's telling you
Right.
you
Yeah.
need to obey your husband. Just be intellectually not honest enough to acknowledge that, and don't try to make it say something that it doesn't just because you don't like the idea of obeying your husband. But here's the thing. I thought we might disagree on this, and that's fine, but I don't think that a woman having to obey her husband is a I don't think it's oppression. I don't view it as degrading. I don't think it makes her a second-class citizen. I don't think any of that. I think that there are reasons why in a marriage or even a non-marriage, it's important for there to be a one that's of a higher authority. And I can even draw this out with like business examples. When you enter into a partnership, like two people, two guys, separate families, whatever, they're just friends, they start up a business, they can't have equal authority. When they write up the laws and whatever for their company, one of them has to get the larger share. One of them has to get, like, if they want to split it down the middle, 51% and 49, it's got to be that way. And the reason is because when you can't agree, there has to be, unless you're just willing to completely break the thing, the business or the marriage or whatever, if you can't agree, there has to be deference to one or the other. There just has to be. And I don't think it was always this way. I think that if mankind hadn't sinned, this wouldn't be the case. But since man did sin, there was going to be conflict. And so God's
No,
like, hey, to preserve
that's a whole
harmony.
debate on itself.
Do what's that?
I said that's a whole nother debate we can get
It
into.
is, and maybe we'll have it. Maybe we'll have it. But here's the thing. I don't view it as intrinsically wrong for a person to be in a position of service, whether that's me or whether that's somebody else. And I'm trying to think the best way to do it, because I could approach this from a whole bunch of different angles. But just look at me as a free person. At least I'm supposedly free. I don't really know how true that is, but
Yeah,
I do have a lot of agency. So let's just say that I'm free. What do I end up doing with my freedom? Well, because I have to survive, eat food, drink water, have a roof over my head, take care of my family, I end up kind of making this agreement, right? Where I'm going to work for a guy and he's going to give me money to take care of myself. And that's actually the job of my employer is to that agreement. It's not their job to make sure that I have house, food, and clothes and all that stuff. But that's what I do with the money. That's why I'm doing. Like, I'm not working for the company that I'm working for because I'm like, this is what I want to do with my life. Like, it's not my passion, right? But I kind of have to engage in this in order to live. And if I was, and I know that this doesn't really mean anything in terms of the argument, but I will just say that as far as like me, if I was a woman and I married a guy, I would be fine submitting to him in the sense that there has to be submission within any sort of hierarchical structure in any sort of system or partnership, which is what a marriage is. Um, and I'll agree and concede, going back, because I want to tie this back into what we're talking about in Leviticus 25. I'll agree and concede that these children did not say, hey, I want to do this. That's the difference between me and these children, right? But I don't see that the like, if these children were actually free, what they'd probably end up doing is they would need to take care of themselves, and they'd probably enter some sort of agreement where they would work. Maybe back then it was a little bit easier to start up your own life, you know, with goats and sheep and land. I don't know exactly how all that worked, but today I know it's
mostly inherited. Yeah. So these people, you know, if you're at the bottom of the rung, it is difficult.
yeah, that would be miserably difficult. That would be just awful. Like in today's society, you can't make it. Without help, you'll just be on the street slurping sewage sludge. You cannot make it in today's America without assistance that I'm aware of. If somebody can,
we have it orders of magnitude better than they did back then.
Yeah, so
starvation was a real big deal. A lot of people just starved to death in those days. You know, disease and things like that. So I'm not saying that there aren't people who benefited from being slaves. You know, that I'm not trying to make any other argument other than that slavery existed and that it was condoned and actually written into law in the Old Testament.
Right.
Now, so if you seem to kind of agree with me on that, so if you do, then we got to figure out how that's morally right.
Okay.
In the eyes
well,
of God.
so I agree and I disagree, and the reason that's not a contradiction is because it's in a different sense, right? So I do agree that these children, especially the children, because this is really where your real argument is. These children, they are denied agency in the sense that they had nothing to do with this. Like, before they were even conceived, their parents were in this position, and they were born into it, and they're going to be serving the Israelites all their life. I don't see anything really bad about that unless you add something that makes it bad.
You do. Yes, you do.
No, I really don't. Well, okay,
you wouldn't want that for your children, right? You have kids?
Yeah, I have one.
So if you were a slave, a foreign-born slave to a Hebrew,
well, so I don't think
it's with your child taking that on.
No. Hold on. So first, I wouldn't use the term slave. Okay, and there's a reason I wouldn't, because when we use the term today in modern times, at least me, being American and familiar with American history, my mind immediately resorts back to the slavery that existed in our country. And I see distinctions between that and this other class of these children who were born to the servants of the heathen that belonged to the Israelites. So I don't concede that that's the correct term. Now, I'll do agree that they were denied agency. I don't think that they, like, see, in the United States, you could, like, whip your servant, you could kill your servant, you could just do whatever. They were regarded essentially as cows, or, like, treated more or less like cows. And so when you say slavery, that's what I think. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to make the clarification that I don't think we can call the whole spectrum slavery. You seem to keep doing it, and I'm not gonna like pick on you too much because I know that I know what you're actually referring to, but I think anybody listening to the conversation has to be paying close attention, because if they don't realize we're talking about, you know, hey, I'm gonna paint your fence, you mow my yard, and it looks like I'm supporting this slavery thing when I'm really not, because that's not really, we don't call that slavery, right? That's why I wanted to make that clarification.
Like we said earlier, it was a whole spectrum.
It was a whole spectrum.
Indentured servants that served for a period of time and were free. Those were the Hebrews who fell into debt or
right. Yeah. So,
but then you know, really for what I believe, for my argument to survive criticism, I only need to find one class of person or one group,
you did
or
those children
that was bought, sold, lived their life, and could be beaten, As you know, Exodus 20 says, if a master beats a slave,
Beaten.
and he lives, a couple days, he's fine.
Well, wait a second
This
now.
is,
Hold on.
I don't see, I'm not finding that big material difference
Okay,
between
okay.
American
We got to get
slavery
to the beating.
and
Okay,
this.
so let me make some distinctions first, just for clarification, and then we got to get to the beating part. So, um, first, I would say that I don't regard them slaves because when we say slaves today, my mind immediately tracks back to something that I don't think that these children servants of the heathen that were in Israel and they didn't actually owe debt. The specific class, I don't see how they're slaves unless you can demonstrate it in the way that I would understand the word slavery today. Now we're going to get to the beating part, and hopefully that will we can get some clarification there. But first, I don't regard the class as slaves just because they're denied agency to essentially do whatever it is that they want to do. Become a doctor, move to Europe, plant peaches. I don't think that automatically makes them a slave. I think that it makes them puts them in a position where maybe they're the lowest class in society. It's difficult. It may not be preferred, but I don't think that automatically counts as the slavery as we use the word today in modern language. Let's so that's where I would make the distinction. So unless you can demonstrate that, yeah, these Hebrew servants or not Hebrew servants, these heathen servants, the children of them, unless you can demonstrate that these people went through, or it was fine according to the laws of the Hebrews to treat them in all the ways that slaves are treated in as we think in the modern sense, then I couldn't concede that. So is it the beating? Which is the things that you think most demonstrate and reflect slavery as we would think in the modern sense?
Well,
The beating?
well, it's all of it tied together.
Well, which thing specifically? You list them
Deuteronomy
off.
talking about how these people are bought. Leviticus talking about how they're perpetual. They lack agency. They are possessions.
Possession. Okay.
And then Exodus saying if a master beats a slave. So it's dealing with instances where masters are beating slaves. So you've got these people, children born, don't owe a debt, committed no crime, lose their agency by birth for their entirety of their lives, and can legally be beaten. I don't know. You're going to have to find the distinction for me between
Sure,
that
no,
and
and I don't mind. I don't mind. Okay, so I just wanted the list so that way I know what to address. So denied agency from birth. They can't pay off the debt. This is lifelong. I'll just add that lifelong. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they're called a possession. Even technically, I don't know that that's the best argument that on your list, because technically the people that were Hebrew servants for like a month, they were still considered a possession.
Yeah.
But possession, beating, and it's lifelong. So I'll concede it was a lifelong. They were denied agency. I'll concede that. They were possession. I'll concede that, but that applies to people that were only in debt for a week. So I don't really see how that's really a thing. The beating thing seems to be your biggest argument. So how about we get to the beating verses?
Sure. Yeah. It's
I mean, did you think that I was fair in that? Like, because the things that you listed or that I gathered from your list was that they're denied agency, it's lifelong, they were bought and sold, or essentially they were a possession, and then beating.
Could be traded.
Do what's that?
They could be traded or sold, bought and sold.
Sure, bought and sold. Yeah, I kind of put that under the classification of possession, because that's what you can do with your possessions. You can sell them, and you can buy a possession. So, but I don't see any of those things.
Is pertinent to all of that. I think that is the definition of slavery.
Right.
What you just described.
The whole list, or just like, you don't think that one of these makes it slavery, right? It's just the collection of them.
It's a collection. Yeah, slavery is a complex ecosystem of rules of lacking agency, lifelong, bought and sold. All of these things is what makes a slave. Like there's a difference between a prisoner and a slave. A prisoner lacks agency,
Sure.
but they did something to deserve that.
It may or may not be
It,
lifelong. Sure.
yeah, and it may or may not be lifelong, depending on the severity of the crime.
They're not a
So
possession, though, technically.
you wouldn't call them a slave.
Right.
They're a prisoner because they did something to deserve that. But these
Right.
children and the women, they did nothing to deserve their.
So,
their
would you want to add
lot.
that to your list then? That these people are innocent?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, innocent. Okay, all right, cool. I just
Because
want
there
I
is
want
a
the full list. The thing about debates, like anytime I'm in a debate with somebody, or I get in one, I always want like their best argument. I don't want like the chicken scratch stuff. So innocent.
Okay.
There's a reason for it. It's because if I take on your weakest arguments, what did I like? That's not one. That's boring. Two,
Right.
yeah, but I just kind of like ignored your stronger ones. It's technically a logical fallacy and or debate tactic people use. I don't like that. I want the hardest stuff that you
And
got.
they'll eat you up in the comments afterward anyway. They'll say,
Oh,
well,
that's
you didn't talk
fine.
about this.
It's fine. Denied agent. So they're innocent. They're denied agency. It's lifelong. They're a possession. Okay, and the beating thing. So, and I don't. So I agree that I can see that they were innocent. I can see that they were denied agency. I can see that it was lifelong. I can see that they were possession. The beating thing, now that gets where we're probably going to differ on that one. So let's go ahead and look at that. Which text specifically? I mean, I know which ones you're probably going to go to in Exodus, but go ahead and you're welcome to read them there. Which one specifically you're referring to?
Yeah, Exodus 20, Exodus chapter 21, verses 20 and 21 are the ones that kind of explicitly
Sure.
deal with that.
Before we read this, though, I just want to point out that before you kept referring to this chapter as dealing with Hebrew servants. Now, when we're talking about non-Hebrew servants, you're wanting to go back to it. And I don't mind if you do that because I'm going to say that it would be applicable, but I'm wondering why you're doing that because you didn't want to do it before. I'm just pointing that out, but let's go ahead and read your verse.
Yeah, no, I think that we would have to, if we can take it one of two ways. We can take it that it was legal and acceptable to beat only Hebrew servants, and that these foreign servants that were your lifelong property, you weren't allowed to beat because it didn't say anything about it. Or we could assume that if you're allowed to beat your Hebrew servants, you're definitely allowed to beat the foreign ones who have even less rights.
So here's the thing.
Again, neither one of those is critical to my argument because I don't think beating is a necessary component of slavery. I think that there were many slaves who were never beaten. They were maybe treated very well, but they still were slaves. So this is just, like I said, it's just a person.
Well, this is the point that I would contend with the most. Yeah, this is the point I would contend with the most. Like I conceded the other points. This one I don't concede on because I don't think it's an accurate. Well, let me hear your argument out first. But usually when people refer to these verses, I don't think they're accurately reading them. Maybe when you read them to me, you'll notice something that I've never considered or something. So I don't want to say what you're going to say before you've said it. But
I'll read it. And I'm using the KJV, which is.
But do you understand how that seems a little bit weird to me? Like every time I would refer to Exodus 21, you're like, oh, but that's Hebrews. Now when we're talking about the heathen servants, you're like, oh well, let's go back to Exodus 21. You see how that's a little bit inconsistent?
We don't have to use it.
No, I want to because I think it applies. I think it's right for you to use these verses. I just noticed that there's an inconsistency in the way that you're going between the texts, but it's okay. Like I'm just pointing it out. Let's go ahead and read your text.
It is not critical to my argument that they be beaten. I don't think that's a necessary component to slavery.
Right? Yeah, and you've made that clear
that they could be,
sure.
Even if it was only the Hebrew indentured servant that could be beaten. It's still a brutal tactic, not one that you would take from your boss for a hard day's labor. To be beaten with a rod, but you lived a couple days, so no charges. That may be a moral debatable issue on its own, that it's the law that it's okay to beat someone who's indentured to you, as long as they don't die right away.
So you
So
do
whether
believe
that
that these
be,
verses are about indentured servants, or do you think it applies across the whole spectrum of servitude?
I would guess that it applies across. Actually,
The
I'll
whole
take that
spectrum?
back. I think that it applies to the indentured servants only. I think that you could kill one of the foreigners, but it doesn't say that explicitly. So that's just my own
Well, no, okay, well,
suggestion.
I have to disagree with you on
Because
that because
they had fewer, right?
it says in this chapter and many other chapters, if a man smite a man that he die, he shall be put to death. And that's a universal thing. Like thou shalt not kill. It's
Mm.
not like, well, you can totally kill like this other dude that because he's a foreigner and he's like he's in your yard, you don't like him, you can do it. Like I I can't even believe you said that because that's against like so many commandments
There's
in the Bible.
just as many verses where God commands Israel to kill every
Yeah,
man,
that
woman, and child.
yeah,
Of
the
every nation.
genocide. We can maybe have that debate sometime. That's an
So
interesting debate.
there's inconsistencies. We'll put it that way. You say thou shalt not kill, but
On the
kill all
surface,
these
it
people.
does appear that way. I agree.
Mm-hmm. So,
Well, thou
but
shalt
that's
not
again,
kill
that's already
doesn't mean thou shalt not kill doesn't mean like there's no such thing as a death penalty for crime. It just means that you're not to kill somebody just because you're mad at them or any other number of reasons. The Bible is explicitly clear that the death penalty for certain crimes was okay. It makes that distinction. So, but we could that's a different thing. It was just very odd that you said, "Oh, you could probably kill your heathen servant," even though it doesn't say it. When there's so many verses that condemn manslaughter in the Bible that it's like it just struck me funny.
well,
So,
again, like I said, that is not really necessary to my
yeah,
contention.
okay. Let's go ahead
But
and
it
read
does
these
say that,
verses.
that if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod and he die under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. And you have a right to, I guess, be mean to your money. Um, that's, that the last part of verse 21, basically describes the feeling that the Israelites had towards their slaves, their servants of all classes, apparently, because this is in Exodus, where we're talking primarily about Hebrew indentured servitude. But even for those guys, as good as they had it on the hierarchy of slavery, um, if he lived a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. I mean, they outlined why he's not punished. He's not punished because that man belongs to you. That's slavery. I mean, there's just no other way to put it.
Yeah,
There's
so
no other word I think that you could find that fits that. That's not indentured servitude.
yeah, I want to
He is
understand
his
how you
money.
interpret the text though.
How would you interpret for he is his money?
So that specific part. So
Right.
the guy, the servant was bought, and because you paid for him and to work in return. Let's see, hold on. So the other guy was buying something from you, or you're making some sort of trade off, and so yeah, you paid for with whatever it was that you paid with to obtain this servant. Yeah, so he's your money. He's your possession in the sense that you paid for this guy for X amount of labor, X amount of years, whatever. So yeah, he belongs. But I think possession, same thing essentially. That's
Right.
what I would read that to mean. It's like he's your money. And here's the thing: if you beat up your servant, it's kind of hard to get work out of him. So it's kind of like, yeah, you don't want to like. I think a master that has any brains about him is not going to want to like beat up his servant in the sense that, well, how are you going to get? How's he going to work if you just beat him up? You see what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay,
That was,
so that's how I interpret that part of the text. I'm wondering how you interpret these texts.
well, I'm interpreting it as you know just slavery, plain and simple slavery.
Yes, I know.
If he continues a day or two, you don't get punished. Meaning, you beat him within an inch of his life to where it takes him 3 days to die, and you suffer no penalty because of that, because he is your money. I mean,
Within
that's
an inch of his life. Okay, so here's let me tell you how I read this, and then maybe you can understand what I'm saying. So verse 20, and if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, that he die under his hand, he shall surely be punished. So, what was the punishment? Just because I want to break this down point by point. What was the punishment for manslaughter?
death. Yeah. Well,
Yes.
I don't know about manslaughter, but murder. I'm sure they had rules about accidental
Oh, yeah,
deaths.
you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. You're right. Okay,
Yeah,
so yeah,
intentional murder. Yeah, the penalty is death.
so if you killed your servant, it says, if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall surely be punished. My understanding is that the punishment for killing a man or a woman would be death. Even if it's your servant, the punishment is death. Do you agree with the interpretation so far?
I would agree with the interpretation. It doesn't specify that, but I think we can put two and two together and assume.
Yeah, when you put two and two together, because it's mentioned in verse 12, he that smiteth the man so that he die, he shall surely be put to death. I think that
Right.
applies to women too. I don't know if there's a verse that says if you kill a woman, it's fine. I know it doesn't say that, but I don't know if it ever specifies the female sex, like that, if it's somehow different. I highly doubt
we
that.
can, for the sake of this argument, we can just assume a man, because where I'm going to stand
Okay.
is, I could assume that the guy doesn't die at all. If the guy never dies, you just beat him
Uh-huh.
because he's your property. That's slavery.
Yeah, well, so okay, but you conceded to the first, my interpretation of the first verse, or you agreed essentially with me, it sounded like. So let's go
Sure,
to the
I
next
can-
verse. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two. Now, what do you understand that part? If he continues a day or two.
He doesn't die right away.
Well, what if he dies 3 days later? Is it fine?
Well, it says a day or two, but again, not critical to my argument. If he lived
No,
6 months,
I understand. I'm trying to understand what you understand from the text, whether it's critical to your argument or not.
okay.
I'm trying to understand what you're reading here. So, do you think that it means that if you smite a man so that your servant so that he dies, you're going to be punished, but if you smite a man and he doesn't die for a day or two, but day 3 or any time after that, if he dies then you're not going to be punished? Is that how you're reading it?
Yeah, if he doesn't die immediately, or if he doesn't die at all, I think
So
they're
he could
looking for an
live.
immediate death. Like if you kill a guy on the spot, he's dead. Yeah, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't die immediately, then you're not in trouble.
What if he doesn't die at all? Because here's the thing. Some people, when they read this text, they read it and they're like, well, if he lives a day or two and then dies, it's fine. And every time they argue that, I'm not saying you are, but every time they argue that, I'm like, it doesn't say and then dies. I think when I read the text, what I'm reading is, if you smite your servant that he dies, you're going to be punished. But if he doesn't die, then no. That's what I'm reading. Right. But they add a phrase, and then he dies. Like, he lives a day or two, and then he dies. And I don't think it's right to add that. Like, I know why people do it, but I don't think it's an accurate interpretation of the text. Do you think, and again, it may not be critical to your argument, but which way do you think it is? Do you think it's well, if he lives a day or two and then he dies, it's fine? Or is it just saying if he continues to live? Which one do you think it is correct?
I've always assumed that if he continued a day or two, meaning if he lived, a while longer.
But
again, it really
and
doesn't
then he
matter
dies.
The time, and then dies. Yeah, but it doesn't matter if he continues on with the rest of his life.
Okay, so you think
he could live 20 more years, but it's still, there's no punishment for beating this person because he's money. That's slavery.
Okay. So all right. So you're willing to go with it either way. You had initially read it, just to make sure I'm clear. Which is the way I think a lot of people do, that if he lives a day or two and then he dies, then it's fine. That's generally, I think, how people read it. I don't think it's right to add that phrase when you're dealing, especially with ancient languages, and it's not even just translated from ancient Hebrew. We're talking that was translated to not modern English, but an older form of English, an older way of speaking. You have to be careful because it's so when I read it, it looks like it's saying if you hit him and he dies, you're going to be punished. If you hit him and he doesn't die, you're going to be punished. That's how I read it.
Yeah, and that again, I can agree with that interpretation because it doesn't change the.
Yeah, it does. I understand. You don't think it's critical to your argument. That's good. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, someone is assaulted with a deadly weapon.
Sure.
And there's no punishment.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. So continue to do it. Yeah, he should not be punished for he is his money. So now I do agree that the master was allowed to punish his servant. I'll concede to the word beat because that's what is it? What does it say? Smite him? It says smite. Now usually people
with a rod.
Yeah, with a rod. Let's just go ahead and assume that means with a stick or like a shepherd's rod. Like I don't really know what all this means, and I don't want to be one of those people that's like, well, if you look in the super secret way of and try to pick a different definition from the ancient Hebrew word list thing. Like I don't like when people use those arguments, so I would rather just assume that this is like a shepherd's rod because he's smitten. I don't want to change it to beat. We'll just say smite. I don't know if there's any way you could even prove what this means, but let's just go ahead and say it's a shepherd's rod. Okay.
We'd have to. The only thing that I would interject there is that we have to assume that it's a weapon of some sort capable of inflicting mortal injury because it says
yes, sure.
So the possibility exists. Whatever the weapon is, a stick, a shepherd's staff, or a baseball bat.
Sure.
The capability for mortally wounding someone with it exists because that's where the rule is written.
Yeah, the thing about capability to mortally wound somebody. You can mortally wound somebody with almost, I don't want to say almost anything. Some things would be pretty hard, like a piece of paper, that'd be pretty tough. But you could mortally wound somebody with like a pencil. So, but anyways, I understand your argument. So here's the thing. While I do think, and this is kind of going to be it's kind of a little funny because these people were actually able to be set free. Whereas the other people weren't. So while we are pulling from this law, I don't know how fully applicable this will be. But while you could punish your servant, we'll just say smiting him with a shepherd's rod, there was a limit to what you could do before the servant was set free. You agree with that, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
and what is the
their teeth? They get to go free.
what is the limit? How would you say?
If I were a Hebrew servant, I'd be smiling at that rod coming at me. Take this one. Lose a tooth and you get to go free.
well, it depends. Like, I mean, you could. Well, it doesn't matter because you don't want you don't want them being blemished. Period. I mean, even if you might be willing to like lose your left leg or something.
Right.
We don't want. It's not preferable. We kind of like to keep the left leg and also not have to pay off the debt. That would just be nice. But so what degree of severity do you think that a master could punish his servant before the servant no longer had to finish paying off his servitude debt? How would you describe it? The severity.
Well, the fairly mild in some instances, dealing with indentured servants. Again, we're dealing with that, that preferred class of Hebrew servant. It says, if he smite out his manservant's tooth or his maidservant's tooth, he shall let him go free for his tooth's sake. So that's why I made the joke about if the guy came at me with the staff, I'd be smiling at him.
Oh yeah, no, I know which verse you're referring to. Yeah.
But then I'm like, woo, I'm free. You
messed
I know what you mean.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there's also
Same with an
verse.
eye. I'd much rather lose a tooth than an eye, I think.
Yeah, there's the eye in verse 26. There's a tooth in verse 27. I think there might even be some other body members of your body, like maybe a toe or something. I can't remember exactly, but in maybe in Deuteronomy or some other texts too. So there is a degree of severity where if you injured them, they were set free. Now, again, this is a person that can be set free, so I don't know how fully applicable this would actually be to somebody who these heathen servants that couldn't be set free. So I don't know exactly what laws would apply. Like this one wouldn't be able to fully apply. Maybe it could actually, in the sense that yeah, they would have been your servants, for generation after generation. But because you knocked his tooth out, he's set free. That's possible. I don't know. Like I don't believe in inserting a bunch of stuff into the Bible just to make my claim and to support my argument. I think that's wrong of me. I think it's intellectually wrong, and I think it's unfair. I think it's, what is it, a deceitful type of thing. So I don't think I should do that. It's possible, but maybe not. It's also possible that, well, I said, but maybe not. So I don't really know. But I do know that, at least in terms of these Hebrew servants that were able to be set free, there was a degree of severity that if you injured them too severely, okay, yeah, bro, you're not treating them well enough. So even if they owe you 7 years worth of labor, which is quite a long time, considering that people only live so long, yeah, you're not treating him right, so you're gonna have to lose that. And this case, of course, would be taken to the judicial system of Israel. I mean, do you agree with all that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So whenever the scriptures are listing the degree of severity, I see that it does it two ways. One is if he loses a member, an eye, a tooth, a toe. I think it's fair to say if he loses an ear or any part of his body, right? But there's another way that the scripture says it, which is in Leviticus 24, 19 through 20. And it could be referring to the same type of thing, maybe not, I don't know. But Leviticus chapter 24, I'm just using my actual Bible. I don't have the tablet here. Leviticus 24, 19 through 20. No, that's not it. No, I'm in the wrong chapter. My bad. Leviticus 24. Still not there. Okay, 19 through 20. It says, and if a man cause a blemish in his neighbor, as he hath done, so shall it be done to him. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, as he hath caused a blemish in a man, so shall it be done to him again. So here it says if he cause a blemish in his neighbor. Now, do you by any chance know what breach for breach means? Because I don't actually. I probably looked that up at one time, but I don't know what that means. Do you have any idea?
I think it basically means like transgression for transgression, meaning again they're trying to cover toes and arms and hands, and basically like a breach of trust means you broke trust. I can pull a
let me. I'm pulling it up now. I'm just curious because Leviticus 24. I would just go with the obvious meaning, but I don't. Breach is not a word we really use, so I don't know what I'm really doing there. 24 verse 20. Let's see what we got here.
In the Christian Standard Bible, it says fracture for fracture.
Breaking, broken, okay. Fracture, yeah, okay. All right, bruise, crashing, destruction, okay. All right, well.
Yeah, I think it basically just applies, any sort of
injury,
damage.
Injury, yeah, I agree.
Is the best way.
I agree. Okay, great. And that's essentially what I was going to argue. I didn't know the text actually said it when I had intended to bring it up, but yeah. So if something gets fractured, fractured or broken or bruised, these were all words in what I had read there, then that's causing a blemish in a man, and because you did that, you're not supposed to do it, it would be returned to you. Now, when we were dealing with the servants, if they lost an eye, then they'd be set free. If they lost a tooth, they'd be set free. Here it's similar, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, breach for breach. And again, I know that this is not specifically referring to servants, but when it says eye for eye, tooth for tooth, when the servants, I think that's giving a principle there. I don't think it's like, well, if you break his hand and it's got to be cut off because it's going, diseased and it's going to poison the blood. I don't think that it's sensible to say, yeah, you could break your servant's hand, or like you could chop off his foot and it's fine because it wasn't his eye or tooth. Like, I don't think that's a good argument. So I think it's getting at a point here, and the point I'm trying to make is that, and it's essentially encapsulated in that expression, breach for breach, which we have, it's similar here in America. So for example, back in the day, you used to be able to spank your kid and nobody would really do anything about it. And you could actually spank your kid, and you shouldn't actually be spanking them like that, because you were actually injuring them. You were causing a blemish in them. You were bruising them. And that's not right. And so we have laws in America that don't allow this. I think it depends on the state. I'm not really sure what the laws are, but what I hear, at least, is that if you spank your child, it's fine. Well, it depends on the state. I got to be careful there. But if it leaves a mark on them, like if they're bruised or something like that, then that's not cool, and you'll get in big trouble for that. So, and that's what it seems to be saying here. The degree of severity might be a little different. I'll concede that. But it seems to be that it's the same type of concept going on here. So while you could punish your servant and, as it says, smite him with a rod, I think that if you broke a leg or something, they would end up being set free. Breach for breach. I know they didn't lose a member, but I think it's referring to the severity of the thing, the loss that you're actually, the loss that the person is actually suffering. So, for example, if I break my arm or wrist, or my master, breaks my arm or wrist, that might be worse actually than losing a tooth, because I can still chew. I mean, wasn't what I wanted, but I can still function. Whereas if you broke somebody's wrist, that could carry with them through the rest of their life, right? So,
sure.
All in all, my point is that, yeah, you could punish your servant, but there's a degree of severity that he wouldn't be your servant anymore because you screwed up. And that's where I think that it's not actually slavery in the sense that we would say slavery today, because when we say slavery today, at least my mind goes to American history slavery, which you could totally kill your slave and it was fine. You could definitely punish them and cause all kinds of blemishes in them. The Bible laws don't actually allow that. You could do it, but there was a severe punishment for it, which is however much labor he owed you. Yep, nope. And I'm pretty sure a wise judicial system, which Israel did have, let's say that the servant only owed 10 more days. They've been working for 6 years. They only had 10 more days to make the 7th year. And then his master takes a rod and strikes and smites his tooth out, but he only had 10 more days. I'm pretty sure that not only is the servant going to not have to work the 10 days, but the judges are going to be like, yeah, you kind of really messed this up, so you're actually going to have to either pay him for his tooth, or your tooth's going to be knocked out too, because you don't do that. That's my, what would you call that? Inductive logic.
Yeah, you may very well be right. You kind of accidentally helped me in my case, bringing this part up.
Go ahead.
You've outlined an important distinction between two classes of people. Free men. If you and I are free men and you knock my tooth out, then I get your tooth as payment, tooth for tooth. But if I'm an indentured servant, I don't get a tooth from the master, I get freedom. So it's not equal. it is a different class of laws for these people. And like you said, maybe if I was 10 days till being a free man anyway,
Well, I mean,
it'd be
don't you
different.
think a wise judicial system would be able to tell the difference between 6 years of dead or 2 years of dead and, 2 weeks?
Absolutely. But
Sure.
the point remains is that these people are living under two separate classes of rules, two separate laws. One
Sure.
is equal, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The other is unequal, eye for freedom. Or
Well,
tooth
but they're
for
they're
freedom
they're
or
already
hand or
unequal
other.
in the sense that they're servants, right? They already are in debt to somebody. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but technically there's already an inequality there, and to balance it out, hey, if you cause a blemish in your servant, yeah, it's gonna just kind of balance out. Like that imbalance that's already there is gonna level out because he's not gonna be your servant anymore. He doesn't owe you anything. So
Potentially, and I probably would rather, as a servant, I would rather have my freedom than his tooth and still be a slave. So it probably worked out great for the
well,
ones that did
when you
get injured
say
and got their freedom.
when you say his tooth that you'd rather have it, are you meaning that you like to physically own his tooth or just the justice of it? What are you meaning?
Well, the laws that you were describing
Sure.
in Leviticus 24 is where kind of the eye for an eye and tooth for tooth.
Yep.
It says that any breach that you perform on someone, so shall it be done to you.
Right.
So if I break your hand, my hand gets broken. That's the justice.
So the justice. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make
So,
sure I understood what you were saying.
But,
Okay. So
but for the servants, that is not the case. For the servants, you break my hand, I'm your servant. All I get is my freedom. I don't get your hand like a free
Well,
man.
correct, because there was already the imbalance. So, like, if neither of us are servants, and I knock this guy's tooth out, then my tooth gets knocked out, and everything stays balanced, right? But if you have a master and you have a servant, and the master knocks the servant's tooth out, instead of the master's tooth being knocked out to cause balance, the balance was I don't owe you anymore. I'm freed of my debt.
Right, but that again shows that there was an inequality. You described it perfectly.
Well,
that these people aren't just hired laborers.
Well, I already agree. Yeah, of course I can see.
They're in an oppressed class. They lack agency. For whatever reason, they lack agency.
Well, I don't know that they're oppressed. It depends on where in the spectrum you're talking about. Like there would be like a whole spectrum of oppression, but I think surely you can agree that on the low end of it, if I'm painting your fence and you mow my yard, that's not oppression. That's just a trade-off.
But that's bartering. But if I force you to stay on my property and do not allow you to leave it, and if I can beat you, and as long as you don't die, I get no punishment.
Well, but you do get punishment though. The punishment is that he doesn't owe you anymore.
Well, if I beat you, but I don't knock any teeth out, I don't break any bones, I just spank you.
Yeah, spank. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at here. So I don't think, because here's the thing. So in today's society, if you have a guy that steals let's say he's like a hacker, right? And he steals $2 million from people through wiring the money to his bank account, and then he withdraws it all, and then he squanders it all, and now he's caught. Finally, he can't pay it back. The way society works right now is that he's going to go to prison, and I'm not going to argue that it's pleasant in prison, but he's pretty much going to get room and board, and it's just, it's not a great life, but in no way is he required essentially to pay back the $2 million to anybody. It's kind of like he just gets away with it, and the people that got stolen from, they're just screwed. And I don't think that's a good system.
Restitution. They try.
There's no restitution, and I don't think that that's right. I think that if this person has stolen $2 million, squandered it all, and can't pay it back, I think he should actually still have to restore that. And now, so here's the thing. So I think that he should serve, whether it's in America, just because we'll talk in that context for a second, he should have to work for free, so to speak. Obviously, he needs to be taken care of, food, water, clothes, just so that way he can survive. But I do think that he should have to restore it. Our system today doesn't do that. The people that were stolen from are just screwed. And I think that's a problem. But here's the thing. Let's say that we're like, okay, well, we're actually going to have him work to pay off the debt. He's going to do something and as labor, and then this company is going to pay us for his labor, and that money is going to go back to pay the people that were originally stolen from. Well, what if that guy says, I'm not going to work? And so when he's taken to the place to work, whether it's in a factory or whatever it is that he's supposed to do, he's just, I'm not going to do it. And he sits on his hands and he's just there. Mm-hmm. What do you do? Because if you put him in prison, again, there's no restoration. So, but he's going to sit on his hands. He's going to be stubborn about it. So what do you do? Well,
our modern prison system has ways of working around that, in that everybody is charged for their stay there. You pay so much for your food. You pay so much for your clothing. You actually, they charge you, I think it's like $20 in Florida to book you.
But does it actually go back to the people that were stolen from?
No, if you get a job, as pressing license plates or making furniture or making boots, there's a whole industry that the prison system has where these people work and they make money, but the money goes to pay restitution to their victims. If
that's great.
And the money goes to basically, they call it commissary, but these folks can, buy noodles and things like that. They can upgrade their conditions through their labor. But if they refuse, because we owe them the right to life, even though they've committed a crime, but it's not a very pleasant stay in prison. They're basically bread and water.
Right. But what happens if they decide that they're just going to sit on their hands and not going to work, and the people don't get restored? I think that that's still unfair, and that I don't think you should cause the blemish in a man. I don't think you should beat him to where his bones are fractured. I don't think you should leave bruises like the word breach says. I don't think any of that. But you can spank a person, which is the word you used. And that tends to get their attention. And to maybe, because, it's a non-damaging, like it doesn't really damage you, but it's incentive, and it gets them to move. And that's essentially what I'm seeing, at least when I read it. And you can disagree with my interpretation if you like. But when I see it, that's what I'm seeing. You could have these people as servants, lifelong servants, but the worst you could actually do was spank them. Because if you caused a blemish in them or a breach, they'd be set free. Now, again, and this is where I have to claim ignorance because I don't know, we did... Originally, you didn't want to go back to these verses because they were about in Exodus 21 because it was about Hebrews. But then you did. We went there because I think that that's fair to do. However, while I do think some of the principles apply, I don't know if these people were able to be set free or not. It's a possibility. But since it's a possibility, I mean, you can't really claim that... it couldn't. You can't really claim that it could. Like, they would be set free, or that they wouldn't if a blemish was caused them. You can't really prove it either way. So I kind of feel like it's left up to, well, we don't know, but we had a great debate. I mean, unless you can argue it.
Because again, important distinction. You talked about a man who stole $2 million and then refused to work. These children never stole anything. They were born into a family.
That's a distinction. I agree.
And they were forced to live their entire lives under that burden. They didn't have agency. They couldn't go plant peaches if they wanted to.
Right.
And if they chose not to, or rebelled against the master, they could be spanked. If you want to call it spanked. This master is spanking human beings who did nothing wrong, who are being denied their freedom for their entire lives. There is no other thing you can call that except.
So let me ask you this: do you think that these heathen servants, and I'm specifically focusing on the children of the Hebrew servants, just because that's really what I want to contend with, do you think that they had any rights as I don't know if they were considered citizens of Israel? I guess I guess since they were part of Israel and were being essentially incorporated into Israel because they were going to be an everlasting possession, I would say that these people were circumcised and became part of the nation. So I do think that I think based off my knowledge of the laws is that they become citizens of the nation. You could argue that they're second class if you want. That's fine. Um, they certainly weren't free in the sense. But I do think that they were citizens of the nation. Do you think that they had any rights at all, or no?
I don't know. I've not.
Yeah.
I think we're reading a lot into. We're making guesses here and
Right. We've
suppositions
reached
on.
the point of making guesses. I agree.
But I know that according to the text, according to the law, they were lifelong possessions. They were
Yeah.
inheritance. They were just a part of the estate, the same as the cattle, the same as the sheep. They may or may not have an opportunity to gain their freedom if they were mistreated. But if they weren't mistreated, they had no opportunity for freedom. They were servants for life. They could be spanked, in the mildest sense. They could be spanked for refusal or just for displeasing the master. As long as they didn't die or as long as they weren't blemished, then that was acceptable. So was it an exact cookie cutter copy of American slavery? No. But was it slavery? Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely was. You can't call it anything else.
Well, well, technically I can. You may disagree with me
Tell
about
me
it.
the other name for it. Tell me the other word. If it's
Well,
not
so
slavery.
I think servitude. It's a spectrum, and within Israel, within the laws of Israel, it was an entire spectrum. It went from extremely trivial things all the way up to these people were bought from the heathen nations, and their servants were to be children as an everlasting possession, and so forth. My understanding of all the laws of well, I don't want to say that I remember all of them, but my understanding and memory of everything that I have read and studied is that these people would become actually part of the nation. The male children would be circumcised and so forth. The same law would apply to them as to all the rest of them, with the understanding of the specificity of that they were to remain servants forever and could never pay off their debt, so to speak. I do agree that that's there, but I do think that they would still have rights within the nation as a citizen. They wouldn't be allowed to worship idols. They would still have to follow all the same rules, as well as the master. One thing that I don't think gets pointed out often enough in these debates is that the master was still required to abide by moral law, and which was that he was supposed to be kind to his neighbor. He was to love his neighbor as himself, and so forth. And so, and God kept telling them, keep in mind, you guys were slaves in Israel, and you know what that was like. So you need to keep that in perspective when you're, interacting with your servants, and not be treated in a way that you wouldn't want to be treated, and so forth. Like the way that it's often presented is that the master could just do whatever they want, and the laws that God gave to Israel was not that you could just do whatever you wanted. It didn't matter who the person was. So I just think that that's a fair clarification. But I do agree that we have reached the point of we're having to use a lot of inductive logic, and instead of deductive logic. I think we've deducted as much as we can. At this point, we would only be using inductive, which I think is necessary because when you don't have the specificity of clearly written scriptures, that's what will happen. But I'm going to go ahead and clarify for you so we know clearly the distinctions between my belief and yours on this position. I do concede that these children of these Hebrews servants, I do concede that they were innocent, that they were denied agency, that it was a lifelong servitude. Whether or not they could get out of it if they were mistreated, I don't know. I would assume that they would, but it doesn't say, so okay.
Under qualifications.
Huh?
under certain qualifications, perhaps they could be.
Yeah, I would think, and I think you were right going back to the Exodus 21. I wasn't trying to like get on your case about that. I think you were right too, because the law, and I clarified this. I can't remember if it was with you or somebody else, but I always clarify this with everybody. It's not intended to be exhaustive. There was principles given for very specific situations, which would probably, I mean, they would come up, but then there would be a lot of intricacy and complexity to other situations, and the judges were to judge by the principles. So I think that it was right of you to go back to Exodus 21 and be like, hey, this, we're probably following at least something similar to this. I do think that that was right. But anyways, continuing on with it, I do agree that they were innocent. They were denied agency. It was lifelong. They were a possession. The beating thing, I think it was limited to some more like a spanking. If you caused a blemish in a man, that wasn't acceptable. So I do not think that any of these things are. Let's see, what would be the worst of these? Innocent. I agree. So you when you say denied agency, that seems like a big one for you. I don't think that it would be if I was born as a horse and I didn't have the same agency as a man. I mean, I'd prefer to be a man, at least I think. I've never been a horse before, but I don't think that that makes me. Huh?
So it depends on the horse.
Oh yeah,
some,
well,
some live pretty good.
it also depends on the man too.
Yeah.
Depends on the man too. So, but I don't think that the horse is just like oppressed and it's not fair because they're denied the agency that they could have had. Like, I know that's a pretty hypothetical. Like, if I was born a horse, like, I know that's very hypothetical, but I don't think that there's something bad about being in a position of servitude. So I just want to make that clarification. But I conceded most of this, but I still don't think it meets the criteria, which you conceded, and I'm glad that we kind of have some common ground there, that it's not actually meeting the criteria of slavery as we think about it today. There's a lot of similarities. They could be spanked. They were a possession. And in the case specifically of these heathen ones, the children were innocent, and they were denied agency for their entire life. I'll concede those points. So, but I'm glad that we have some common ground there. Do you have any final thoughts? I know that I'm a talker, but I want to make sure that you get to talk and flesh out anything you feel needs to be, because that's fair. And yeah, so what else? Do you have anything, or do you think we summed it up well enough? Are you comfortable, confident?
Pretty well. The only just a closing, last defense of my position. I looked up Merriam-Webster definition of slavery.
Sure.
And it defines slavery as the practice or institution of holding people as chattel involuntarily and under threat of violence. That's the definition of slavery.
Okay.
So I would love to hear how what we just talked about is not that, because it seems to fit it pretty well.
Sure. So I don't mind.
It's not identical to American slavery, nor is it identical to Chinese slavery or Japanese slavery or European slavery. Everybody had versions, and they were all different. I mean, these guys, at least they weren't, turned into eunuchs like the Greeks would do with theirs. I mean, they had it better in some ways, worse in some ways. It's all different, but that's why the broad category of slave is just lacking agency. It's involuntarily held under threat of violence. Nothing else really matters. It's that's just different flavors of the same soup.
Okay, so you said involuntarily chattel.
Yeah,
can you give me the definition of chattel specifically?
Sure. Yeah, it is an item of tangible, movable, or immovable property, except real estate and things connected with real estate. That's the Merriam-Webster definition of chattel.
So you're involuntarily a possession, and under the threat of violence. Do you think? Well, I don't want to use children, but Well, sure. So if you spank your child, you don't leave marks on them, definitely. But if you spank their child, are they under a threat of violence?
Um, I suppose, yeah, yeah,
Are
sure.
they a possession?
No, they're not. They're not being held involuntarily either. They're not being. Uh,
Well,
I mean,
they
they
didn't
go to
ask to
school.
be
They.
there. I'm not trying to like blur distinctions. What I'm trying to do is like whenever you have a definition of something, it's have you ever written definitions? It's actually tough.
Oh, I know exactly. I know where you're going with this. Yeah, it's
It's
like trying to
very
draw a
tough.
map. You're going to lose some clarity.
No, I'm not trying to what no, it's a thing. I've written definitions before. I've written legal documents, I've written definitions, I've written fiction, I've written all kinds of stuff, logic, philosophy. And whenever you're writing definitions, I found it especially hard because whenever you do it, you want to be specific enough and precise enough so when you so that when you see it, you're like, "Oh, this is that thing."
right.
But if you're so exclusive, it won't include things that actually shouldn't be included. So it's kind of difficult. So I'm not trying to blur the distinction there. I'm just trying to point out that it can be a little tough. I don't know if that's the best definition. I'm willing to just go with that definition, and that's fine. But for example, like the children are, you could say, under the threat of violence, maybe not blemishing violence, but you know, pop them on the butt, little spanking, no marks. Uh,
Right. But
you know,
they're not held as property. I think that's the distinction there.
probably yeah. Well, they do belong to their parents. If you want to look at it in the sense of the from the government, they're the property of the state. So I don't really like that. I really don't
I
like
don't
that.
either. It's
But
another thing we agree on.
yeah, I don't think children belong to the state. I think children, if they belong to anybody, it's first to God and then to their parents. But then involuntarily, well, they didn't ask to be there. Not that they dislike being there, like they don't really know anything else. Hopefully, they're treated well. Um, but I don't know. Okay, so what was your question? You wanted me to do to defend to demonstrate how this is not slavery by that definition?
Right. Well, you don't even necessarily have to. That's really just, I wanted to offer that was
Oh,
the
sure,
Merriam-Webster definition of
sure.
slavery. And in my mind, seems to align very well with, the
with
biblical,
with the biblical,
um,
sure, yeah. And
biblical law.
if you want just like for what is it, what do they call it when they do that, I'll just be gracious or whatever and just say sure, by that definition that could be included. I think if you were to think about it, probably other things could be included too that shouldn't be. Definitions are very tricky when you're writing them. It's
Hmm.
tough. I wouldn't ever want to have to write a dictionary. That would be awful. But
Oh, yeah.
sure. But the common ground that we do have is that while there was similarities, it's not exactly the when we think of slavery today and the term gets used today, especially when we think our own history, we're not exactly talking the same thing. What in that Israel was doing, it's different. Um, so, but that's the
I,
common
I,
ground.
I definitely agree with that. I wouldn't
Okay.
argue that it's identical in any way. All slavery takes different forms.
Right.
Every culture has
So,
its own versions.
let me ask you this, just for clarity's sake, because you've done this, and it always bothered me, but I've been letting you slide with it. You always kind of refer to the entire spectrum of slavery. Where do you think like it actually cuts off though? Where it's like, okay, this person's not a slave; they just owe a debt or whatever the thing is, but to where it actually becomes slavery. Like, where is that line where you should actually be calling like the milder versions something other than slavery? Because you just call
Right.
it all slavery, and it's always bothered me. But
Right.
where do you
For
just
me,
make the distinction?
it's the yeah, it's the agency for
Agency?
me.
Okay.
If a person has their own agency, then they have the choice to work for that person or to not work for that person. They have the choice to starve if that's what they want to do.
Okay.
But they can't be beaten for it. They just go off and die. That is, you have the agency that if I don't like this job, I can go look for another
Right.
job. I can go work for that guy. All of those things were lacking in this.
Okay.
And that to me, and in all forms of slavery, where I view just a laborer even an indebted servant, if they have the option to pay off the loan and go free, that is, I mean, it's right on the line. That may not be considered slavery by some people, even though they're bound to that. Um, they entered into it willingly. They had agency
Right.
when they
They
entered into
when they when
that
they
contract.
entered into it, like the contract. Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that may not be slavery. I mean, that's something that you could definitely have an argument there to say you chose that, so you've got agency in this. Um, and I'm not disputing the fact that that probably happened a lot. There were laws written about it, so it obviously was a common practice. Um, Bartering only goes so far. If you don't have enough chickens to buy the cow, you got to do something else, and so
Right.
that's
Yeah.
what it was. That was what it was for. But at the same time, and I think you agree with me, there was this other version that was lack of agency,
Yeah, they lack the agency. Sure.
lifelong, under threat of violence, and that's just slavery. And so they had that spectrum,
Yeah.
and in many ways, if you asked, was it better, kinder, gentler slavery? Sure, I'll agree with you. I think Israel probably had. I think if you were a slave in a neighboring country, you'd wish to be sold to Israel. You'd probably have a much better go of it, even though it was still slavery. So it's something that I think a lot of apologists, want to say, well, it was better, and I wouldn't disagree. They had laws at least to protect, their slaves, where a lot of places didn't. You could kill one and nobody cared. It was your property, but that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it morally right. What was being done was still, I think, objectively wrong. But it was written into the Hebrew law as legal. And again, we kind of touched on this once before. I feel kind of, in a way, I don't want to say I feel sorry for you, but I feel your pain because as a Christian, you're kind of cornered in that you have to believe that this is a univocal word of God, and that
No.
and so if for it to be morally right, that means this can't have happened because there's a conflict there between what you personally feel is right. I know that you as a human being feel slavery is wrong, but you can't say that the Bible's wrong. So we have to find some way that all of this makes sense.
Well,
I don't
but
have that problem.
yeah, no. Well, yeah, I don't. I wouldn't feel bad for me because the name of my podcast is Unashamed Contender, and I always present myself or introduce myself as the Unashamed Contender. So I'm not in any way feeling cornered or in any of this. I think that my case is stout enough. I think that the thing is that there's the laws are limited to not being a never-ending book spelling out everything. I don't think that they were intended to do that. People wouldn't read it. They were there to give principles, and then you were to have intelligent people that would apply them. And I think that if this was done, um, then there wouldn't be much problems. I don't think, and I do want to remake this clarification again. The lacking agency, I don't think that this is bad and of itself. Like, again, if I was born a horse and I lacked the agency that a man has, or if I was born a woman and chose to get married, and because I chose to get married, which you didn't have to do that, you could have maintained your agency or whatever, but you willingly went into it. Like, I don't see any of these as bad. It's different. It may not be preferable depending on the horse or depending on the man. You might rather be a horse lacking agency than a human with agency that's in utter poverty and suffering. I mean, but I just don't view it as bad to be a child that doesn't have the freedom and the rights, or bad to be a woman who's married that has to obey her husband, or bad to be a horse even, or anything that would be considered a lower level or a lower class, or even even a servant. I don't view it as bad inherently to be in a position that's lower than someone else. Like, I'm not God. Am I somehow like being treated unfairly? I know you don't believe in God, and that's fine. but I do, but I don't see, like, I'm not an angel. Well, that's not fair. I should be an angel. I should be able to fly. I'm being denied. Well, I don't think so. I think it's fine. And if there's abuse of something, then I think it's definitely a problem. But I don't think I'm being abused just because I lack wings or because I lack the whatever it is, depending on wherever I am in the existence of created things and intelligent beings or just beings that maybe not don't have the reasoning capacities or intelligence. I don't think it's bad to be in any of those situations inherently, unless there's some sort of abuse or mistreatment or something. Does that make sense? Like, that's kind of how I approach it. I just don't view
I
these
understand
things.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't agree with it, but I understand what you're saying. I think that a
Do you
human
think that
being.
there's some sort of
And
like
I can
argument
even
there?
use the Bible for this. Um, Something that many Christians will cite a lot. You see this. You can't read three comments through some of these debate forums without getting into free will. Everyone says God gave man free will, and so you have the freedom to sin or the freedom to choose him or not choose him. All of these things are based on free will. But would you not agree that uh, the conditions that these foreign uh, bond servants were under denied them their free will?
No. Okay, so when I well, yeah,
Or
so
denied them a degree of free will?
so when I think free will, I'm not thinking freedom. Like, I just feel like it's different. So free will to me is you have a mind and you are capable of making a decision. Like, you're not a robot. I don't know if animals have the capacity to make decisions or if it's more like everything's instinct. I really don't know. But that's what I view free will is the ability to have done otherwise, like in your own mind. Like, I could be mistreated and beaten, I could be a slave, I could be put in prison, and I might lack freedoms in those ways, but free will is specifically about the will, and the will is specifically the capacity or the ability to make a decision with your mind. So
So just from a philosophical or just perspective, free will is making choices, not actions.
it's
It's kind of way
well,
not
yeah,
related to action,
free
just
will.
how you organize your thought.
Well, it is. Well, because here's the thing: if I decide that I'm gonna walk down the hall and grab a banana or something, the action follows, and the free will is the ability to make that decision. Um, yeah, it's the ability to make that decision. Maybe your legs are tied up and you can't walk down the hall, but it's the ability to make the decision. If you're somehow physically impeded or something, that's not a matter of free will. That's a matter of free body. The
Okay.
free will is just the intellectual the capacity to make decisions in your mind. That's how I define free will.
Okay, that's fair enough. I was just
Yeah.
curious about that because it is
Well, I think
you
that's
see
what
that
people
a
are
lot.
referring to, is it not?
Well, most of the time when we see it on the in the forums, it's dealing with salvation, that man has free will to choose, and it's a common debate that guys get into, saying, you know,
Sure.
according to quantum physics,
Oh,
I'm
mercy.
bound, I'm determined, I'm just running a track that's already been laid, and I don't have a choice. Or you could go like, God made me the way I am, so if He made me a non-believer and He wanted me to be a believer, He should have put things in my path to make me believe. And that's where then the apologists will come back and say, He gave you free will.
Yeah,
You
the
can choose
predestination
left
thing
or
is
right.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it's not. I didn't want to even bring it up for the sake of this argument. It's just when you were talking about it, just sprung into my mind the whole free will thing, and that.
Oh yeah, no, I
Um,
understand. You're good. You're good. You're good. Okay, so those I think this was a great discussion, a great debate. I think we talked about a lot of relevant points. I think I conceded a lot of things. You conceded a lot of things. We had some common ground there. And you just still believe it's slavery, and I believe it is definitely a more severe, if just for lack of a better word, form of servitude. I don't think it meets the modern definition of how we think of slavery when we look at history. But that's fine. This was great. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. Do you have any final comments?
Absolutely. No, I loved it. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It was a
All
lot of
right.
fun.
Well, thank you. Take care. And
And
to
it's nice to put a face to the messages on the forums.
Oh yeah, no, it always is, and I think these conversations go better in when you can see somebody's face and their tone, hear their tone instead of just the words. But to my audience, if you've been watching this debate and have enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you would like to debate me, please message me, and or we can play apologetic mock trials where you actually agree with me, but we kind of like interrogate each other just for fun. Or if you actually have something you disagree with me about, get with me and we can talk and maybe get you on the show. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for having me.